On the tough guy's side. I think this is the time for Colin Powell to step in and really assert his authority and his moral authority with the president.
All right, we're told now with certainty that it's 9 o'clock tonight that George W. Bush will be speaking to the American nation and to the world. As these things always happen, that signal will be going out around the world. What, as a last point to you, Ms. McDougall, would be the key points that you'd want to see George Bush saying tonight?
Well, he will probably then go on to talk about some of those steps around the borders and leaving no stone unturned. I don't know that he can go a lot further than that unless they have information that none of us are aware of, and which it's unlikely they will have by 9 o'clock tonight. I think mostly it's important that Americans see their president, they see their leader visible, and consulting with people and ensuring them that he will take whatever action is necessary. Terrorism is it's a phenomenon that does require a very forceful response. Terrorism does not respond well to turning the other cheek. It simply builds the confidence of terrorists if they think they can get away with it. So I think he will respond very strongly.
Appreciate your insight on this. Barbara McDougall, former Foreign Affairs Minister, External Affairs Minister in this country, presently the President of the Canadian Institute of International Affairs, joining us here in Toronto. Thank you very much. Well, from Toronto, let's go back out to Calgary. It's been a couple of hours since we had our discussion with Wilf Engel, a former American Airlines pilot who has been helping us from the pilot's perspective on all this today, trying to get a sense of what may have been happening in those final moments in the cockpits of the various aircraft that were hijacked today, two of which went into the Twin Towers of the the World Trade Center in New York. It sounds like we may be having an audio problem here. Mr. Engel, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Mr. Engel?
Peter, if you can hear me, I can't hear you, then I will get back with you as soon as they can fix my problem here.
Okay, that's good. Well, Engel, calm in the seat there, just as I'm sure he was in many flights as well, as he hoping to get that audio hooked back up again with Calgary. Wilf Engel was giving us his thoughts on what might have been happening in those final moments in the cockpits of the various aircraft that were hijacked today, and his concerns about security measures, obviously. This now, once again, the live shot in New York City, the continuing aftermath, keeping in mind that it's now been 9 hours since the first aircraft struck into the World Trade Center. An hour and a half later, both towers were lying on the ground in rubble. The smoke still pouring out of that area. Since there have been fires in neighboring buildings, the collapse of a 47-story building that was adjacent to the World Trade Center, hit by the debris of the falling towers. It collapsed a little less than an hour ago. Have we had any luck with Calgary yet? Can we hear? No, we're still working on that audio problem, and that is unfortunate. But there we see the horrific scene on the southern end of the island of Manhattan. Much of it has been evacuated throughout this day. There have been rescue officials trying to get to the area where the buildings crumbled into the ground. The problem is the emergency crews say that the situation has been just too dangerous for many hours throughout today to get anywhere near the rubble to work on any possible rescue attempts.
Other items coming up tonight. First of all, Kaidi, we've been saying, and I believe it's still the case, Mayor Giuliani and Governor Pataki are expected to brief the press again in the neighborhood of 6 o'clock, just really moments from now, but that may be a little bit later than that, but we'll bring that to you live.
Show you what was handed to us just now.
Special edition of the Post.
The front page of the Post, special edition. It says, "Terror just destroy World Trade Center."
And then 9 o'clock tonight, President Bush. We have gotten confirmation now that President Bush is going to go on national television tonight to address the nation about this tragedy. Now, you've been keeping up with the school situation a little bit more. Let's take a look at what the young folks have tomorrow.
All right, so here is the very latest. This has changed throughout the day, but right now the information we have is this, that public schools in New York will be open tomorrow. except for the New York Archdiocese. Their schools are going to be closed. The New York Archdiocese, until further notice, I assume, but definitely closed tomorrow. And the spokesman for the Archdiocese, Joseph Willing, says the schools outside of Manhattan, the Bronx, and Staten Island will then reopen on Thursday. But again, I suggest that you call your kid's school and see what's going on individually.
Right, everything is in flux right now. Do we have Jerry Hauer on the phone? Mr. Hauer, Jerry Hauer, you will recognize Jerry Hauer if you watch local news in New York at all. At the site of virtually every mishap, disaster, collapse, breakdown, he was there. He was the director of the Emergency Management Office up until I think about a year ago. Mr. Hauer, are you with us?
I sure am.
Tell me about, you were there until about a year ago, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
You as much as anyone, is responsible for the operation of New York City's Emergency Management Office through some pretty tough times in recent years, but now this. What, as somebody whose job this is, what did you think when you saw this morning?
Well, this is an absolutely devastating event. I mean, this was an attack on the country. This was a very calculated attack by cowards that was designed to kill many people. I think that when you look at this type of an incident and its potential impact, it's got significant ripple effect. But I think at this point in time, we have to look at how we can help the families, the victims, the many firefighters and police officers that were lost today. And I think the focus really has to be on that. And in due time, I think that our federal government, the president, has vowed to go after the people that perpetrated this horrific act, and I think we have to have faith in that.
When you were in that job, running the Emergency Management Office, and you would sit around and brainstorm and think of worst-case scenarios, which I know was really an important part of the job, was preparation for anything that might happen. Did you discuss something like this?
We discussed major incidents. We absolutely did. We discussed incidents with hundreds and hundreds and thousands of victims. One of the reasons that we entered into mutual aid agreements with New Jersey and with Westchester, Nassau, Suffolk County was to have medical resources, police and fire resources readily available for an event that just created large numbers of casualties. The event that occurred today is almost surreal. It is just hard to imagine an event like this occurring.
Just a short time ago, saw the tail end of a large airliner plunge into the Pentagon.
I was in the building because I was driving a friend. So I'm worried for her safety.
The World Trade Center is no more.
And this is a live picture at the column of smoke and ash still billowing up from the lower Manhattan area of New York over the skyline, which will now be forever changed as terrorists today crashed two hijacked jetliners into the World Trade Center and brought down the twin 110-story towers. Another hijacked commercial jetliner crashed into the Pentagon in Washington. Good evening to you. I'm Brian Williams. It is 6 p.m. on the East Coast, 3 p.m. on the West Coast on what has been one of the most horrifying days in American history. Terrorists carrying out well-planned, well-coordinated attacks that have left perhaps thousands dead, thousands more injured. President Bush is vowing to hunt down those responsible. He is due to address the nation tonight at a time yet to be announced. This all got underway at 8:50 a.m. Eastern Time as American Airlines Flight 11, hijacked after leaving Boston Logan Airport for Los Angeles LAX with 92 people on board, crashes into the South Tower of the World Trade Center, leaving a gaping hole. There are gaping holes in the building and at the top floors in flames. Then at 9:08 a.m. Eastern Time, United Airlines Flight 175, en route from Washington to Los Angeles with 65 on board, crashes into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. The entire terrifying scene captured on videotape as it happened. Then, 9:30 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77, carrying 64 people from Washington to Los Angeles, crashes at the Pentagon outside Washington, the heart of the Defense Department. One of the building's 5 sides collapses. Then between 9:50 and 10:30 a.m., both towers of the World Trade Center collapse. It's estimated up to 50,000 people might have been working there on an average day. Thousands more can be visiting at any given time. 10 a.m., United Airlines Flight 93, carrying 45 people from Newark, New Jersey to San Francisco, crashes 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. There are rumors the plane may have been headed for either the White House or the U.S. Capitol. Amid all of this, emergency measures are being taken from coast to coast in this country, including evacuations at the Capitol and the White House. The FAA has grounded all air travel until at least noon tomorrow nationwide. And we're going to dip in now as the crisis seems to be continuing overseas in one form or another. As part of an agreement today among news organizations to share all news gathering, we have these pictures of what is going on in Kabul, Afghanistan right now. These are coming in via a digitized video phone where we have just watched missile attacks in the skies over Kabul, Afghanistan. Anti-aircraft rockets in the air, explosions and tracers visible in the night sky. Kabul is the seat of power in the nation of Afghanistan, and you see there in the distance a line of flames. What we're lacking here is context, connection between what happened today, the events that may change life in the United States of America, and what is happening half a world away tonight in the dark, in the skies and on the ground in Kabul, Afghanistan. But these are live pictures coming in via CNN on a video phone. Let's begin our coverage with this in mind with NBC News Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent Andrea Mitchell in Washington. Andrea, what are we watching? What's its connection?
Difficult to know what we're watching, but it would be, if they are missile attacks, it would most likely be American retaliation against Kabul, because we had warned the Taliban leaders of Afghanistan that if there were any evidence indicating that Osama bin Laden, whom they've been harboring for many years, was responsible for today's attacks or for any other attacks, that we would retaliate. This warning has been communicated to the Taliban leaders directly and indirectly over the course of many weeks. They denied today any involvement by bin Laden, but we have been told by top officials in the United States government that they are 90% sure that bin Laden was responsible. I don't think we would have been told that if they didn't have enough evidence to retaliate. So what you may be watching, and I should stress, Brian, that we don't know the source of this video, but what you may be watching is tracer attacks, signs of missile attacks on Kabul, and if that is the case, it could well be a U.S. retaliation for what happened today.
Andrea, the missiles were earlier visible in midair, and the trails behind them were consistent with what we've seen to be cruise missile attacks in the past. Now we see the flames flaring up in the center of the lens. We're going to pause just a minute. We'll dip into the audio of their coverage. We'll come back and talk further about what is underway tonight.
First, we're seeing the flash, and then we hear the detonation some several seconds afterwards, and they appear to be coming from that airport area, in some cases several miles away from us. There is still a lot of flashing we can see in the air reflected off clouds that could be thunder and lightning. However, there's a possibility that those reflections are missiles landing elsewhere. The flashes as they explode and reflecting off the clouds. But it's not a good indication. We certainly don't hear any detonations coming from that particular direction at this time. The anti-aircraft fire that we were seeing a little while ago is not coming up from the city. The city, apart from the detonations we were hearing a few minutes ago, appears very, very calm. The visibility here is excellent. We can see all the way across the city. It lies on a plain that's surrounded by the mountains here in Kabul. We have high mountains to the right. These mountains were used by the Mujahideen as vantage points for shelling the city several years ago during the Mujahideen infighting in Kabul. The last 5 years, the Taliban have been in control of this city, have been trying to extend their control over and across Afghanistan. And the foreign minister this evening telling journalists and CNN that he didn't believe that Afghanistan would be attacked. He said if Afghanistan was attacked, then they would call it, the Taliban would call it an act of state-sponsored terrorism, Joey.
All right, that is CNN's Nick Robertson. Again, please keep the line open to us. Nick Robertson there.
Andrea Mitchell back in the Washington Bureau on this day when, if nothing else, we have learned to expect anything and not to trust anything. We've had false reports of a car bomb at the U.S. State Department and a plane landing at Camp David. If, Andrea, this was indeed an American cruise missile attack, retaliation, what footprints would the attack on the U.S. have to have left behind?
Skip Brand, former counterterrorism director for the FBI.
We've apparently lost touch with Andrea Mitchell in Washington. John Palmer is at the Pentagon for us tonight. John, perhaps you can handle that question. And the question is, what footprints would the attack on the U.S. have to have left behind for retaliation to come so swiftly, it being just past 6 p.m. here in the East now?
Brian, they would have to have certainly hard evidence to trace this back to bin Laden, to carry out this particular attack. It's been unusual today because officials have been rather outspoken, pointing fingers. And as Andrea Mitchell reported a short time ago, that's a little bit unusual this early. Just a short time ago, a number of reporters were picked up. We're about a half a mile from the Pentagon. As you can see behind me, that huge, horrible, gaping hole in the west side of the Pentagon where the hijacked American airliner crashed about 9:30 this morning. The officials from the Pentagon came over and picked up a group of reporters to take them over for a briefing. And I'm sure the uppermost question on everybody's mind is going to be, what about this retaliation? Is it underway? And what's going on? And how is this particular tragedy traced directly to them?
Now, John, as we look at the damage, retrace a little bit the events of this day. The attack had just taken place in New York. The government as a whole was reacting suddenly, and this was close to a landing pad there at the building. One of the 5 sides, as you just pointed out, having collapsed. Suddenly, all those at work and the death toll hovering around at 100 felt the concussion.
Yes, let's go back to about 9:30. Most of the people in this building were glued to television stations and television sets watching what was unfolding with the World Trade Center in New York City. And then shortly after 9:30, there was a huge blast. There were shouts in the hallways. A little bit later, smoke then filled the hallways. People dashed out. An alarm went off at the Pentagon for people to leave. We are told that Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld himself left his office, which is on the far side of the Pentagon, ran around to this gaping hole, this side of the Pentagon on the west side, and personally tried to help some of the people to get them out there. This occurred about 9:30 this morning, and hundreds of firemen have been battling the blaze now for more than 8 hours. They have it well contained, but many areas have not been searched for casualties simply because of the flames and smoke.
John Palmer at the Pentagon, thanks. We're going to go back across town to our Washington Bureau. Andrea Mitchell, we had missile trails in the sky over Kabul, Afghanistan. What have you learned about this, Andrea?
According to senior officials, they do not believe this is an American attack. This is not from the Pentagon. Let me be clear on my sourcing. It is from another intelligence agency, but they do not believe that this is a U.S. attack. They think possibly this is dissidents in Kabul, but be very careful. We have no confirmation at this point that the U.S. is retaliating against Afghanistan.
All right, so tonight, on this day that has seen an unprecedented attack on the continental United States, missiles in the air over Afghanistan, it would seem to most pros that it would be awfully early for any kind of retaliation, and indeed, Andrea Mitchell's sources telling her that would be correct, that this is not U.S.-sponsored in any way, that it may be some other elements. But that is the picture tonight in Kabul, Afghanistan, again on what has been a horrendous day in the United States, a day that may change the U.S. way of life. Lower Manhattan has been the epicenter of all of this beginning this morning. Most recently, it was the scene of yet another building collapse, one of the victims of today's earlier attack, really, by two hijacked aircraft full of passengers, and it is alleged hijacked pilots at the controls instead of the commercial jet pilots. Our own Ashley Banfield is in Lower Manhattan, where number 7 World Trade Center was the latest building to collapse late this afternoon. Ashley?
It's about 45 minutes ago. It went down right behind us, just a thunderous cloud of dust again passing through the streets of Manhattan. Brian, it's happened 4 to 5 times already today. It was standing right behind us, as I said, at about 5:30 Eastern time. We had been warned. They were just waiting for this one to come down. The windows had already blown out. It had been an inferno for hours. We'd been cleared 5 different times northward from the from Ground Zero, where the first and second World Trade Centers came down just after about 10 or 11 this morning. And every time we moved, there was this concern there'd be other buildings that went down. It was rather strange, but I was doing an interview with a woman and a small baby who were evacuating their apartment not far from this area when number 7 came down. Here's a look at the tape. You can see what happened. Please be careful of your baby. Oh my God. Look behind us. Please pan in this way. Please be careful of your baby. This is it.
That's the building coming down.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. No. No. Listen.
We're okay.
We'll be all right. We'll be all right.
We're okay. I think we're okay. Ashley, I think we're okay.
All right. We're going to have to move this way. We're going to have to move. We're going to have to move. That cloud is coming this way. Yeah. The concern is that the cloud was potentially going to be moving this way. The wind kept it eastward from us. We could maintain our position here on the perimeter. I just want to show you, Brian, from here down on the ground level in Manhattan, what some of the things that have been collected from the street can show us. I don't know if you can zoom into here, Michael, but these papers were collected from 1 and 2 World Trade Center. The headers on them say those addresses here, the 81st floor deliveries, the 87th floor deliveries, the 90th floor, the 92nd floor, what kind of parcels have come in. They were found scattered within a mile. Also this, I just wanted to show you as well. These are what were being cut as tourniquets for a lot of the triage stations that were set up in the treatment areas. I can also tell you that a police officer who had been down in that dust zone for the better part of the entire day told me that a morgue had been set up, the location of which wasn't being disclosed, but that most of the bodies, take a look at this if you can, as this vehicle goes through. That's evidence of what we've seen a lot of today. Police and emergency vehicles covered in the Mount St. Helens type dust, and also the windows blown out. An ambulance also burned all along one side, the windows blown out of it as well. The ambulance driver passing through here and telling me this ambulance was new this morning. It's really just an unbelievable scene, Brian.
All right, Ashley Banfield in Lower Manhattan. It was an unbelievable day for the traveling White House. We may never know the threat assessment as seen against this president today. This day saw him start out in Florida, then move to 2 different Air Force bases, one in Louisiana, one in the Midwest, before being en route back to Washington tonight, where we have learned he will address the nation on television. Because the White House was evacuated, the Vice President and First Lady were taken to safe places. NBC News correspondent Bob Kerr is doing his work out of FBI headquarters that has become the de facto White House briefing room this evening. Bob, good evening to you.
Brian, good evening. On the phone this time because we have moved. A small group of us now are the first to be let in back to the White House. I have just cleared security, and you know the walk. I'm walking down through the northwest gate into the driveway, looking straight at the West Wing as we speak. So a small group of press now being allowed back in here to the White House. What's odd, Brian, is that tonight, a little while from now, there was supposed to be a joyous and gala barbecue on the South Lawn, a barbecue for Congress put on by President Bush. Obviously, that is not going to happen. The president himself was out of town today and kept out of town for a good while. First in Nebraska, first to Louisiana Air Force facility, and then to a Nebraska Air Force base, from where he will come back here to the White House. Also, for that matter, the congressional leaders, we're told, were also spirited out of town to protect them. I can tell you, Brian, we made a 7-block walk from the FBI building on 10th Street up here to the White House on 17th. It was and remains a ghost town in Washington. You could look down one of the major streets and see nothing but traffic lights and white lines. No cars. In one case, we saw a big fuel tanker truck escorted by 2 police cars moving quickly down one of the main streets. As you know, President Bush today has spoken about this attack on the United States twice, calling it a national tragedy, calling the incidents cowardly acts and terrorism against the United States, which he says will not stand. Here's a bit of what President Bush had to say in a statement this afternoon.
Freedom itself was attacked this morning by a faceless coward, and freedom will be defended. I want to reassure the American people that the full resources of the federal government are working to assist local authorities to save lives and to help the victims of these attacks. Make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts.
Brian, back here at the White House now, again, a small group of us being allowed in, awaiting, we think, what will be a statement from President Bush after he arrives here. A parting thought for you. One of the sights that was utterly unreal here today was in the skies above the White House and the National Mall in Washington. On at least 3 or 4 occasions, one could look up and see fighter jets crisscrossing in the sky. There were obviously no commercial planes around. All that had been shut down. Instead, there were overflights by jet fighters in and around the area of the White House and the mall.
Bob Kerr back inside the White House after a day outside the White House. And for those just joining us, that is indeed Lower Manhattan you were looking at earlier. What's different about the skyline? The World Trade Center, the landmark Twin Towers, both gone. The death toll is staggering. So many people from all walks of life, and it is destined to grow throughout the evening and throughout the days ahead. Among those who died is Barbara Olson. She had a long career in public service, was a television commentator, and the wife of the U.S. Solicitor General Ted Olson. Barbara Olson, a frequent contributor on NBC News broadcasts, was 45. She was on board the plane that crashed at the Pentagon today. For more on the 4 different commercial aircraft that were hijacked, we go to NBC News correspondent Jim Cummins at American Airlines headquarters in Fort Worth, Texas tonight. Jim, good evening.
Good evening, Brian. That's right. It was outrageous and audacious, hijacking 4 commercial airliners.
You're watching News Channel 2. This is a 24-hour news update.
Hi, I'm Ann Shea.
And I'm Tom McClanahan. Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us. The attack on America is keeping all of us close to our televisions. Right now, we'll bring you the latest on how this event is hitting close to home.
Terre Haute Mayor Judy Anderson and 9 other community leaders are in Washington, D.C. right now. They were meeting with the Bureau of Prisons and were scheduled to return to Terre Haute today.
Of course, they have been grounded in D.C. They're staying at the Hay Adams Hotel, which is right across the street from the White House. We spoke with both Chamber of Commerce President Rod Henry and Mayor Judy Anderson earlier today about their experience.
Breakfast, and would you believe the hotel that we're in is directly across the street from the White House. So we all the commotion started early in the morning, about around 9:15, 9:30, but it was only talking about the World Trade Center, and it wasn't until we kept eating and realizing and worrying about that we realized the Pentagon also had been hit. And the hotel said if you went to the terrace, you could see the smoke and you could see all the commotion. And obviously they closed the terrace off right away. So we're in a beautiful hotel. We're right across the street from the White House, and right now there's not a soul around. They have blocked everybody totally away from the hotel, a block away. with the yellow tape, and no one is allowed to come up this way unless you have a key to get in the hotel. So there's lots of security, there's lots of sirens, there's it's just like almost like a dead place right now.
Our plans are to our normal plans were to be leaving tomorrow mid-afternoon out of Baltimore Washington International Airport. But I'll be on the telephone tomorrow morning because basically we're done. There's nothing more we're going to do.
Right.
We're just going to stay put right now at the hotel, not do much. We'll probably go out to a nearby restaurant after a while and then come back here and just, like everybody else, just huddle around the TV together and watch this thing continue to unfold. Tom, I mean, the mayor came up with the idea that we ought to go give blood while we're out here, and we did. We headed towards a blood center not far from the hotel, but we got there, and the people came out and said we have at least a 3-hour wait, and they said we close at 7, and frankly, we don't think we have enough medical supplies to take care of everybody.
Right.
So they've asked us to come back tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, and we're going to try to do that. So.
A lot of reaction from people there in Washington, D.C. Back here at home, churches all over the area are holding prayer vigils this evening. News Channel 2's John Swanner is at United Memorial Methodist Church on Poplar Street in Terre Haute. John, what's the mood there?
Well, the services are set to begin very shortly at 5:30. They're just a few minutes away, and I am joined by the Associate Pastor Steve Buck and the Pastor Bruce Buckley. And first of all, gentlemen, why hold this type of a service on a day like today?
Well, this is an opportunity for people of the community to gather together in mutual aid and support and prayer during this time of great national crisis.
So more or less an outlet for them to display their feelings about this.
Yeah, everybody wants to respond to some kind of an emergency like this, and we're not in New York, we're not in Washington, we can't go move bricks, but we can all come together in an attitude of prayer.
Okay, what type of a service are we expecting today?
We're going to have a brief service. The point is to bring people together, to remind them that God is in charge even when things like this happen in the world, and remind them that their job is to be there with them, with those who have been impacted through prayer.
And what do you hope to accomplish, Pastor, with this service?
Well, a sense of mutual support and bonding, perhaps. Many people have differences of opinions about what we ought to do or how we ought to respond. But we seek the will of God in what we ought to do, and we come to pray about that. Perhaps it's important to remember the words of an old hymn written by Isaac Watts. He wrote, "O God, our help in ages past, our hope for years to come, and our hope for America is for years to come."
Okay, very kind words. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And the services are set to begin at about 5:30, just one of several in the area. Tom, and back to you.
Thanks a lot, John. One major concern at this hour is the gas prices we're all hearing about. Some stations are reporting prices over $5 a gallon. This is causing a panic. People are flocking to gas stations and causing major traffic hazards. Emergency personnel are fearing a possible gas shortage if the current rate of gas sales continues. We have been assured by oil distributors that these prices are only temporary, and it's in everyone's best interest to not panic. If you can wait to gas, wait.
The local chapter of the American Red Cross has volunteers on hand helping families who have relatives in the New York City or Washington, D.C. area. If you need assistance finding a family member, you can contact the Red Cross at 812-232-3393 by dialing that same phone number. You can also make a monetary donation as well as learn how to become a Red Cross volunteer.
We will continue to bring you local updates as they are warranted. For now, we send you back to NBC News in New York.
To a third country, so we need The United States has to take the lead.
You're a veteran attorney. What about when that increased surveillance, increased security runs up against the Bill of Rights?
Well, we've been able to solve those problems in the past. Brian, I think there'll be an awful lot of cooperation from the American people and the courts in recognizing that this is a dire American emergency and one that we'll have to do it within the context of our Constitution, but I'm confident that we can.
I want to get you on record on the uniquely American ability to put party labels aside and fall in line behind the chief executive during times of great national strain?
Well, we've done it over and over again, and clearly we will do it this time as we have so often in the past, as we did in 1941 after Pearl Harbor, as we did indeed after the riots in 1967 and 68. We recognize that we're in a situation where we're going to have to act together. We're going to have to be unified and put partisan bickering to one side as rapidly as we can.
Is there anything worse about this vis-a-vis Pearl Harbor in that we still don't know who the enemy is?
Yes, that's certainly right. There you could focus on a particular enemy, find ways to combat this, but under the present circumstances, we're going to have to take some time and find out who did it and how to react.
Well, Mr. Secretary, after what's been a very tough day in this country, when you look back at the events of the last couple of hours, you look at what had been passing for domestic political issues, in addition to this changing day-to-day life in the country, do you think this will change the access of the entire argument? Do you think this will increase now interest in things like your stock and trade, foreign affairs?
There's no doubt that it will. I think we're going to have to understand where this came from. We're going to have to understand who our enemies are around the world, and we're going to have to understand who our friends are. I would hope and expect that all the civilized world will join us in combating this, not just our NATO allies, but China and Russia as well. We need to get together in the civilized world to combat this. And on Capitol Hill, I think there will be a whole new set of issues. I don't expect to hear much talk about what happened to the surplus in the coming days.
Did we get too lax? Did we get too carried away with the end of the Cold War?
Yes, I think there was some laxity, much as there was before Pearl Harbor. We perhaps were too confident about we are a long ways away from the terror of the Middle East. I'm not saying this came from there, but it bears many of the earmarks of that. 4 suicide bombers or groups of suicide bombers, because those planes probably weren't taken over by a single person. You can just imagine what went on board those planes. So it bears some marks of a society, a group of people that we simply don't understand and can't comprehend. But that doesn't mean we can't take full action in meeting it, even though we may not be able to comprehend it tonight as we sit in our stunned concern for the people of New York and Washington, D.C.
Former Secretary of State Warren Christopher, as always, sir, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Brian.
For those of you watching us on the NBC television network, stay tuned for a special 90-minute edition of NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw. For those of you with us on MSNBC on cable, stay with us for uninterrupted coverage of this attack. I'm Brian Williams, NBC News.
Attack on America, a special edition of NBC Nightly News. Terrorists declare war on the United States, hijacking jetliners, crashing them into New York's World Trade Towers. Another airliner into the Pentagon, threatening the seat of national power. Thousands likely dead. Downtown New York in chaos. America wondering, what next? On Midtown Manhattan, and tonight America is at war with terrorists after a stunning series of attacks today against targets in New York and in Washington, D.C., the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. The terrorists used hijacked civilian airliners and their passengers as guided missiles in their attack. The most serious attack on this country since Pearl Harbor, and tonight the dead still are being counted. An unknown number still are missing. At this hour in this war, another development, there are reports out of Kabul tonight, the capital of Afghanistan, of explosions. But the Pentagon and the CIA are flatly denying that the United States had anything to do with those explosions. This has been one of the darkest days in America, and it is not yet over. Here at home now, a quick look at the locations where the 4 airliners hit. The Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan, 20 minutes apart. Then, within an hour this morning, the Pentagon. And then, the final crash just minutes later, about 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh, 266 people on the 4 airplanes alone, all presumed to be dead. At the World Trade Center even more than 9 hours now after this disaster began. Officials do not know how many people were killed, how many still are trapped in all of the rubble. We do know that on most days there would be at least 20,000 people at work in the World Trade Center at the time that the airliners crashed into those twin towers. Another 90,000 could be expected in the vicinity of those towers in the course of an average workday. And of course, scores of police, firefighters, and other emergency personnel were in the area when the buildings came down. We're going to get the view now from the White House and our correspondent there, Campbell Brown, also from the Pentagon and from Jim Miklashevsky. And I'm going to join now with a complete account of what this day has been like from NBC's David Bloom, who's been my colleague all day long. David, bring us up to date.
Well, Tom, more than 9.5 hours since the first attack, the smoke billowing from the hulks behind me is now more gray than black, indicating that the fires have diminished somewhat, but it's still an extremely dangerous situation. Just within the last hour or so, a third building, a 40-story building, also collapsed. 40 more stories of concrete, steel, and iron crashed into the ground. A makeshift morgue has been set up near the World Trade Center. New York City police still sticking to their early estimates that the casualties ultimately may number in the thousands. Nothing more precise than that. We've put together a chronology of the events as America's watched, dumbfounded, and yes, outraged and defiant. The first attack plane, a hijacked American Airlines flight out of Boston, slams into the North Tower of New York's World Trade Center at approximately 8:42 a.m. Eastern Time. The explosions and fireballs broadcast live by television helicopters, which then, horrifically, spot the second attack plane, a United Airlines flight hijacked from Boston, taking dead aim at the World Trade Center's South Tower. It's now approximately 9:03 a.m. Hey, where the hell can I meet you? I'm across the street from the Marriott, man. A second airplane, a 727, just ran into the building. Emergency officials estimate 20,000 or more people may have been inside the two 110-story buildings at the time of the attacks. Eyewitnesses report victims falling, and in some cases, jumping from the two buildings.
But there were people falling out of the sky.
At 9:29 a.m., President Bush in Florida addresses the nation for the first time.
Terrorism against our nation will not stand.
But in the nation's capital, just 11 minutes later, 9:40 a.m., a third hijacked plane, an American flight out of Washington Dulles, crashes into the Pentagon in a burst of flames, the plane's wreckage tearing a gaping hole into one side of the building. Federal buildings are evacuated, government leaders taken to secure hideouts. 9:59 a.m., the until now unthinkable, the South Tower of the World Trade Center collapses. An unknown number of people still trapped inside, including the rescuers, firefighters, and police who'd gone in trying to save lives. Then at 10 a.m., hundreds of miles away in western Pennsylvania, a fourth hijacked plane, a United flight out of Newark, crashes 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. 1/2 hour later, 10:28 a.m., the North Tower of the World Trade Center collapses. Rubble, debris spreading for blocks. In all, 266 people aboard 4 hijacked planes are killed. Untold others in Washington and New York missing and presumed dead. In New York, a defiant Mayor Rudolph Giuliani.
The city of New York in the United States of America is much stronger than any group of barbaric terrorists.
For the first time in U.S. history, the Federal Aviation Administration closes all domestic airports, shutting down all U.S. airspace until at least noon tomorrow. The U.S. military and American embassies worldwide placed on the highest alert. Navy aircraft carriers and destroyers deployed along the eastern seaboard. The president, now in Louisiana, speaks for a second time.
The resolve of our great nation is being tested. But make no mistake, we will show the world that we will pass this test.
The president is then taken to the secure Strategic Air Command in Nebraska, meets with his national security team via teleconference before boarding Air Force One late this afternoon. A third damaged building, the 40-story World Trade Center number 7, also crashes to the ground. And emergency officials allow the first camera crew from NBC News inside the smoking hulks of the Twin Towers. Ground zero, cars overturned, steel torn apart, glass shards, small fires still burning. The very picture America most feared, the image terrorist most wanted. As to who might be responsible, a senior American intelligence official tells NBC News tonight that they are now, and I'm quoting here, 90% certain that Osama bin Laden, the Saudi-born terrorist, was responsible for today's attack. This official tells NBC News, quote, "This is not just surmise, this is new information." The president plans to address the nation from Washington, D.C. tonight. Tom?
Thank you very much, NBC's David Bloom. And we're going to go now to Washington, where NBC's Campbell Brown, who covers the White House, is on duty. But across the street from the White House, the president is expected back there shortly. Campbell?
Tom, the president is on his way back to Washington tonight. We're told that Air Force One is being escorted by F-15 fighter jets on each wing. As David said, he is planning to address the nation tonight. One aide says his message will be one of resolve and reassurance. And Tom, we are reporting to you tonight a block from the White House at a hotel. That's because those of us in the White House press corps, along with White House staff, were rushed out of the White House this morning as the entire complex was evacuated. Needless to say, this has been an extraordinary day for the president. One aide says when he spoke with his national security team in a live teleconference today, he said, quote, "We will find these people and they will suffer the consequences."
Yes, still.
The president at a Sarasota, Florida elementary school about to begin a reading event gets first word shortly after 9 a.m. in a phone call from his national security advisor. One plane has crashed into the World Trade Center. Minutes later, Chief of Staff Andrew Card leans over and whispers in the president's ear. The reaction on Bush's face, the first sign of more horrifying news. A second plane has now hit the World Trade Center with all indications this is a terrorist attack.
Today, we've had a national tragedy.
As Bush speaks, chaos at the White House. Staff and press are ordered to evacuate. People run from their offices across Pennsylvania Avenue. Crowds pour into the streets as buildings nearby are evacuated. People gather around car radios for any information. Fire engines blaze toward the White House. Shortly after 9:30 a.m., the president's national security team is in the Situation Room, a secure communications center in the basement of the West Wing. Vice President Dick Cheney is there, along with National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice. Meanwhile, the president leaves Florida, his destination at takeoff a secret. We later learn he's landed at Louisiana's Barksdale Air Force Base. There, he pledges, the U.S. will retaliate.
Make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts.
The president then flies to the Offutt Air Force Base in Omaha, Nebraska, the U.S. Strategic Air Command Center. We're in a bunker there. He convenes a national security meeting, joining his team live by teleconference. Back in Washington, his top advisor, Karen Hughes, insists the White House has the situation under control.
Your federal government continues to function effectively. We have a federal emergency response plan, and at President Bush's direction, we are implementing it.
By telephone, the president calls New York Mayor Giuliani and New York Governor Pataki. He also speaks with First Lady Laura Bush. The First Lady and Bush's two daughters are also rushed to secure secret locations. Mrs. Bush, on Capitol Hill when the attacks began, tries to offer words of reassurance.
Well, parents need to reassure their children everywhere in our country that they're safe.
We have just learned that Air Force One has safely landed at Andrews Air Force Base just outside of Washington. From our vantage point, we can see sharpshooters on the roof of the White House tonight, Secret Service patrolling the grounds, police cars driving up and down Pennsylvania Avenue, the White House in a lockdown as we wait to hear what the president has to say to the nation. Tom?
Thanks very much, NBC's Campbell Brown. And there are so many questions, but a major question tonight. How could they hijack 4 civilian jetliners in such a precise fashion? How do they pull all that off? Our aviation expert is NBC's Robert Hager, and he's standing by now in Washington as well. Robert?
Tom, 4 airliners turned into deadly weapons. There's a nationwide hold now on all commercial flights. That's the first time that's ever happened in our nation's history. And it lasts at least until midday tomorrow and might last longer than that. And there are also some chilling first details of what may have been going on in those cockpits. But first, the facts.
The string of events that results in these 4 horrific crashes begins at Boston's Logan Airport, 7:45 a.m. American Flight 11, 767, with 92 on board. Supposed to fly Boston to Los Angeles, but over New York State, it's diverted, forced to fly south, directly into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. A long day of carnage is underway. Back in Boston, United Flight 175, another 767, with 65 aboard, is already in the air, also bound for Los Angeles, 15 minutes behind the first flight, when it too is hijacked. This, the actual plane, as it hits the South Tower of the World Trade Center. 8:10 a.m., American Flight 77, a 757 with 64 aboard, has taken off from Washington's Dulles Airport, also bound for Los Angeles. It too, taken over and loops back into the Pentagon. It slices in at an angle, leaving a deadly and ugly gash in the nation's military nerve center. And finally, 8 a.m. out of Newark Airport, United's Flight 93, a 757 with 45 aboard, bound Newark to San Francisco, hijacked as well, but crashes short of whatever its intended target is, comes down in rural western Pennsylvania. Eyewitnesses there.
And I heard a loud noise, and I happened to look up, and it was a plane. It was real low to me. It sounded like it was running fine to me. I just kept watching. I watched it go nosedive straight into the ground.
You could see where the plane made the initial impact in the ground, and it was still on fire. It made a crater probably 30 feet by 30 feet, and it's probably 15 or 20 feet deep, and there's just debris scattered within probably a half-a-mile radius.
There are only two ways terrorists can sneak themselves or their weapons aboard planes, either through passenger screening or by going unscreened through locked doors into off-limits areas or onto the tarmac. Periodic FAA tests have found plenty of flaws. Found when government agents tried to sneak into secure areas, they were successful more than 2/3 of the time. Found testers also often able to sneak fake guns and explosives by X-ray screening. Once aboard, many speculate the hijackers must have disabled crews and taken over the plane's controls. More likely that than forcing a pilot with a gun at his head to fly right into the World Trade Center, for instance. Former American Airlines pilot Jim Tillman.
It is inconceivable to me that any airline pilot would allow anyone to force him to fly into an inhabited building. I cannot imagine how any pilot could be conscious or capable of doing anything to control that airplane at the time that it was directed at one of these buildings.
Terrorism specialist Neil Livingstone.
I suspect that what we're going to find is that the pilots were overwhelmed, perhaps dead already, and that trained pilots from the hijacker camp were in charge of those aircraft and were willing to die for their beliefs.
If there was time, if there was, the crews may have been able to press a button in the cockpit and send out a coded warning to controllers that there was a hijack in progress. Controllers may then have radioed back inquiries. But if the crews were disabled, the controllers would have been left in the dark for real information. Whatever else, controllers must have been surprised, in disbelief. There hadn't been a commercial plane hijacked in the U.S. for 10 years, since 1991. And now this.
There are several unconfirmed reports around that give little glimmers of what may have been going on in the cockpits. There's one from a controller in New Hampshire who says that a microphone was left on in the first plane of the day that was hijacked, that the pilot had his microphone keyed so it was picking up the what was going on in the cockpit, and that the controller then, off at the control center in New Hampshire, heard a terrorist say in English, "Don't do anything foolish." Then after that, the microphone went dead. The transponder of the plane went off. That's a device that radios information out to the radar, so controllers could only watch the blip. They could no longer tell what altitude the plane was at. There were several cell phone calls from relatives on board planes who reached their relative on the ground. One reported the terrorists had knife-like instruments, and there was one unconfirmed report that an American Airlines flight attendant actually reached her company to say that terrorists had killed the crew of her plane. Whatever else, we may know some more from the cockpit voice recorders, which could have survived those crashes and would give us an actual recording of what was going on for audio in the cockpits. Tom?
Thanks very much, NBC's Robert Hager at the Pentagon right now. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Henry Schultz. Let's hear what he has to say.
Our intense focus on recovery and helping the injured and the families of those who were killed is matched only by our determination to prevent more attacks and matched only by our unity to track down, root out, and relentlessly pursue terrorists, states that support them, and harbor them. They are the common enemy of the civilized world. Our institutions are strong, and our unity is palpable. Senator John Warner.
Thank you. As a past chairman,
that is
preceding Carl Levin,
General Shelton, who is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, talking about the institution strong, and our unity is strong as war. We are on a war footing, in effect, in this country, even though there has been no official declaration of any kind. But from a military point of view, political point of view, and certainly from a psychological point of view, we are at war with these terrorists. The question is, who are they? Within the intelligence community, all the fingers are pointing at Osama bin Laden, the very wealthy Saudi dissident who has been harbored by the Taliban, it's widely believed, in Afghanistan. Let's get more tonight on the continuing speculation about who is responsible from NBC's Andrea Mitchell now at her post in the nation's capital. Andrea?
Tom, tonight U.S. intelligence officials are mobilizing worldwide to try to find the culprits and make sure that they don't strike again. An attack on America coordinated with military precision. 4 planes, split-second timing, penetration of airports and airspace, no warning.
They can destroy buildings, they can kill people, and we will be saddened by this tragedy, but they will never be allowed to kill the spirit of democracy. They cannot destroy our society. They cannot destroy our belief in the democratic way.
The first question tonight, is it over? The terrible answer, despite billions spent on U.S. intelligence, the nation's top experts do not know where or when terrorists will strike next.
The problem is that they are hard to penetrate. They are located in places that we're very hard-pressed to get any kind of information out of. And as hard as our agencies have tried, they've had some success. You don't hear about that. We only hear about the failure.
Who could have done this? Before today, the worst failure, the attack on 2 U.S. embassies in Africa 3 years ago. Again, perfectly timed, no warning, 224 dead. The alleged mastermind, America's most wanted terrorist, Osama bin Laden. Bin Laden also involved, U.S. officials say, in helping the man convicted of bombing the World Trade Center, Ramzi Youssef, 9 years ago, by protecting Youssef before and after that attack. Last winter, CIA Director George Tenet told Congress that bin Laden is capable of multiple attacks with little or no warning.
Osama bin Laden and his global network of lieutenants and associates remain the most immediate and serious threat.
Bin Laden's alleged millennium plots planned attacks on 3 tourist areas in Jordan frequented by Americans, on Los Angeles International Airport, and on a U.S. destroyer in Yemen, all foiled. But 6 months later, terrorists do strike successfully, ram another destroyer, the USS Cole, killing 17. In June, bin Laden brags on this home video of killing U.S. sailors, a remarkable tape made to recruit more terrorists against America. And just 3 weeks ago, a warning to a London newspaper, allegedly from bin Laden's group, that he was targeting America again.
I think it is a dilemma for the United States now. I believe the only thing is, to revise their policies, to look at what's happening. Why, for example, the anti-American sentiment is very high in the Middle East and in the Muslim West.
How could this happen? Only from a massive intelligence failure. But in this case, at least there will be some evidence.
The good news is that the hijacking 4 airplanes is a very complicated operation. Even hijacking 1 is complicated. And they will have left some trail behind them. They will have had to have checked in, and they will have had to have purchased tickets either under their name or alias names.
To learn how you can help victims of today's national tragedy, QVC urges you to call the American Red Cross at 1-800-HELP-NOW. That's 1-800-435-7669. QVC acknowledges today's events and expresses our heartfelt concern with this national tragedy. For more information, please turn to your TV news channel. In light of these events, QVC will be temporarily suspending its broadcast.
Staff about how to proceed. Confident that the White House had been secured, he then headed back for Washington, determined to send a signal to the world that America would stand strong in the face of these horrible acts.
And Dan, some more tough talk tonight from the president ahead of his address to the nation. A report just filed from aboard Air Force One. His spokesman, quoting the president, is saying, "We will find these people and they will suffer the consequences of taking on this nation."
I say to them that the President of the United States will be making some remarks to them this evening that will address those subjects.
Mr. Secretary, you've declared, the Pentagon has declared ThreatCon Delta forces around the world. Could you tell me why? Have you received any threats, or has anyone claimed credit for this?
We have, in fact, declared Force Protection Condition Delta and a condition of high alert, indeed the highest alert. We did so almost immediately upon the attacks, and it is still in force.
Mr. Secretary, were there threats, issued against other U.S. facilities elsewhere in the world today?
I don't know that there's a day that's gone by since I've been in this job that there haven't been threats somewhere in the world to some facility somewhere. It's one of the complexities of the intelligence business that you have to sort through those kinds of things. But we don't get into the specifics. Yes. You raise your hand? Yes.
So, Mr. Secretary, there were rumors earlier in the day that the plane which crashed in Pennsylvania had been brought down by the United States, either shot down or brought down in some other manner.
We have absolutely no information that any U.S. aircraft shot down any other aircraft today.
I wonder if we could just ask Senator Levin one thing.
You bet.
That's all right. Senator Levin, you and other Democrats in Congress have voiced fears that you simply don't have enough money for the large increase in defense the Pentagon is seeking, especially for missile defense. And you fear that you'll have to dip into the Social Security funds to pay for it. Does this sort of thing convince you that an emergency exists in this country to increase defense spending, to dip into Social Security if necessary, to pay for defense spending, increase defense spending?
And one thing where the committee was unanimous on, among many, many other things, was that we authorized the full request of the president, including the $18 billion. So I would say that Democrats and Republicans have seen the need for the request.
Mr. Secretary, could you describe what steps are being taken, defensive measures beyond force protection, and whether there's been any operational planning for Homeland Defense that's been instituted?
Those aren't the kinds of things that one discusses.
Sir, the perpetrators of the Khobar Towers bombing were never found. The Cole bombing.
We're listening to a live news conference from the Pentagon, part of the Pentagon that wasn't hit by the attack today. And you can also see there the presidential helicopter. President Bush has returned to Washington. He landed at Andrews Air Force Base a few minutes ago, and now he's going by chopper to the White House. He'll be addressing the nation shortly. Let's go back and hear what else the Defense Secretary has to say about today's attacks.
The podium have talked about being ready, the military is ready, as General Shelton said. And we understand the Navy has dispatched 2 carriers and some guided missile cruisers and destroyers and a couple of Marine Corps helicopter amphibious ships such as the Baton, if not the Baton, here into New York. Can you tell us if that's true, and also any other things you can share with us about how the United States military is preparing to take on whatever in the next few days?
And we don't make announcements about ship deployments.
Mr. Secretary, can you describe the firefighting efforts that are going on right now in that corridor and search and rescue efforts that are beginning?
Can I describe them?
Yeah.
Why don't we let the Secretary of the Army, who was out there with me a few minutes ago and has been talking to the incident commander on the site.
I think it's fair to say at this point that the fire is contained and will shortly, if not already, be sufficiently controlled to allow entry into the building. That entry will be supervised by the FBI, who are in charge of the site, assisted by the fire departments that are present. We, on the Army side, will support them as they go in the building and search for casualties and bring them out. Then we will support them in dealing with that. That's what's going on the ground.
We'll take one last question.
Is the government operating under the assumption that this attack is done, or is it poised or bracing for more action?
The government is certainly aware that it's difficult to know when attacks are concluded. And I want to thank Senator Chairman Levin and Senator Warner, and certainly Secretary of the Army White and General Shelton for being here with me. And we'll excuse ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So there we are, a news conference live from the Pentagon involving Donald Rumsfeld, the defense secretary there. He said this was an indication that we're functioning against a terrible act against us. He said that there had been no attacks against Afghanistan by the Americans. There are reports from Kabul tonight that the city has come under attack, missile attack, rocket attack, but he denies the Americans were involved. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Shelton, said that it was an outrageous act of barbarism, today's attacks on New York and Washington, but he said their unity was strong and their confidence palpable. And then we heard from Senator John Warner, who said that this was the most tragic hour in America's history. But Senator Warner went on to say, but this can be our finest hour. You're watching BBC World News. You're watching BBC World on the day that terrorism again struck the United States with catastrophic loss of life. America under attack as hijacked planes crash into the heart of American power. Two rip through the twin towers of the World Trade Center. One after the other, the towers collapsed into rubble. The extent of casualties is still unclear. And then Washington, another plane crashes into a defense building at the Pentagon. Welcome to BBC World News. I'm Philip Hayton. Heavy loss of life and catastrophic destruction. That's the scene on the streets of New York after the United States suffers what's being described as the worst attack on the country since Pearl Harbor. A huge operation is underway to find survivors from the wreckage of both towers of the World Trade Center in New York. They collapsed after hijacked airliners with passengers on board were flown into them. The 47-story Salomon Brothers building, situated very close to the World Trade Center, has also collapsed. And part of the Defense Department, the Pentagon near Washington, continues to burn after another hijacked airliner plunged into it. The mayor of New York has said the casualties will be more than any of us can bear. There are no indications so far of who's behind the attacks. President Bush said those responsible would be hunted down. He's to address the nation in 2 hours' time, having just returned to the White House.
It should have been a perfect day. But just before 9 o'clock, the pure blue sky over Manhattan was filling with smoke. A hijacked American airliner had just smashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. No one quite knew what had happened. Surely this must have been a terrible accident. But what happened next showed these were no accidents. A second hijacked airliner, a Boeing 767 with 92 people on board, is flying straight for the other tower. By now, many hundreds of people must already have been dead, and the unfolding disaster could be seen all around New York.
There's another one. I'm taking a look.
Oh my God!
My own eyes. It must be
Another plane just went in. At that time, there would have been about 10,000 people in each tower of the World Trade Center, many thousands more in the Wall Street financial district all around. Those who could were running for their lives.
was just standing here watching the World Trade Center after the first plane hit. I just saw a second plane come in from the south and hit the South Tower halfway between the bottom and the top of the tower. It's got to be a terrorist attack. I can't tell you anything more than that. I saw the plane hit the building.
When a big explosion happened, some guy came out, his skin was all off. I helped him out. This is him all over. There's people jumping out of windows. I've seen at least 14 people jumping out of windows. It's horrific. I can't believe this is happening.
We heard a big bang, and then we saw smoke coming out, and everybody started running out, and we saw the plane on the other side of the building, and there was smoke everywhere, and people are jumping out the windows. Over there, they're jumping out the windows, I guess, because they're trying to save themselves. I don't know.
But it wasn't only New York and America's financial heart which was under attack. Now it was the nation's capital, too. In Washington, the Pentagon was hit, headquarters for the armed forces of the world's superpower. A third hijacked airliner, again with dozens on board, had been crashed with devastating results. By now, smoke was billowing around Capitol Hill, and the White House was being evacuated. People were talking of a new Pearl Harbor, someone declaring war on the United States. And back in New York, the nightmare was still far from over. Firefighters were in the basement of the World Trade Center, wondering if the building above was safe. The unthinkable was about to happen. The South Tower, all 110 stories, collapsed, and it was all live on American television.
Thanks very much. Completely collapsed.
The whole side has collapsed?
The whole building has collapsed.
The whole building has collapsed?
The building has collapsed.
That's the southern tower you're talking about.
Exactly. The second building that we witnessed the airplane enter.
On the ground, emergency services hardly knew which way to turn. People still trapped in the second tower had seen it all and could only wave in desperation. But it was already too late for rescue. The second tower, representing America's trade and wealth, was about to go.
Everyone aware that we're going to be feeding some tape.
The Twin Towers, which took 7 years to build, had been utterly destroyed in a single morning. The Manhattan skyline and countless lives devastated.
Big boom, come down the steps, everything fine till we got to the basement, and then everything just fell in. I got trapped under there with another guy, crawled out, kept getting hit in the head, had bags floating around. Finally, we clawed our way out over the rubble.
Yeah.
Come on down. You did all right. All right, way to be, Tom. Let's go.
Even the bloodied felt incredibly lucky on this terrible day. And firefighters could embrace each other for a few moments before facing many more hours of trauma. As New York struggled to cope, to adapt to the clogging dust, the fallout of so much tragedy, more news was coming in, a fourth crashed airliner in Pittsburgh. And somehow American government seemed almost powerless amidst all this. The centers of that power had been evacuated, key congressional leaders taken to secret locations. The president himself whisked to a nuclear bunker in Nebraska, shaken but pledging somehow to find those who masterminded this day of mayhem and massacre.
Freedom itself was attacked this morning by a faceless coward. And freedom will be defended. I want to reassure the American people that the full resources of the federal government are working to assist local authorities to save lives and to help the victims of these attacks. Make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts.
Hours after the attacks, the United States, the whole world, is struggling to take it all in. There's really no more rescue the firemen can seriously attempt. It's now a question of salvage amid the wreckage.
Suspects armed with knives. This plane crashed into the World Trade Center. United Airlines Flight 175 departed Boston for Los Angeles, was hijacked and crashed into the World Trade Center. American Airlines Flight 77 departed Washington Dulles for Los Angeles, was hijacked and crashed into the Pentagon. United Airlines Flight 93 departed Newark for San Francisco, was hijacked and crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Crime scenes have been established by the federal authorities in New York, in Washington, D.C. area, in Pittsburgh, in Boston, and in Newark. The full resources of the Department of Justice, including the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Immigration and Naturalization Service, the U.S. Attorney's offices, the U.S. Marshals Service, the Bureau of Prisons, the Drug Enforcement Administration, and the Office of Justice Programs are being deployed to investigate these crimes and to assist survivors and victim families. Thousands of FBI agents in all of the field offices across the country and in the international legat offices, assisted by personnel from other Department of Justice agencies, are cooperating in this investigation. The FBI has established a website where people can report any information about these crimes. That address is www.ifccfbi.gov. That address again, www.ifccfbi.gov. Individuals can report any information they know about these crimes to that website. It takes courage for individuals to come forward in situations like this, and I urge anyone with information that may be useful and helpful to authorities to use this opportunity. The Office of Victims of Crime has established a toll-free 800 number for family and friends of victims. They can call 800-331-0075 to leave contact information for a future time when more information is available, to find out information about a victim, or to find out information about the rights of victims and the services available to victim survivors and victim families. The determination of these terrorists will not deter the determination of the American people. We are survivors, and freedom is a survivor. A free American people will not be intimidated, nor will we be defeated. We will find the people responsible for these cowardly acts, and justice will be done. Tommy.
Every single American lost something today. And every one of us at this time expresses our deepest sympathy to the victims of today's tragedies and their families. It is now our mission to begin the healing from this tragedy. From the moment that we learned of these attacks, the Department of Health and Human Services has begun readying teams and resources to be sent to New York City and the Washington area to meet any needs of state and local officials. So far, we have sent 4 disaster medical teams to New York City, and 3 of these disaster medical teams to the Washington, Northern Virginia, Baltimore area. These medical teams each consist of about 35 physicians, nurses, and emergency medical technicians. They are all trained to deal with traumatic injuries and other emergency needs. We've also sent 4 disaster mortuary operational response teams to New York and 3 to the greater Washington area. We're also in the process of shipping a great deal of emergency medical supplies to New York City with the help of the Centers for Disease Control. In short, we're making the full force of the Department of Health and Human Services, both its resources and medical expertise available to the areas that need our assistance. We've also this afternoon activated the United States Public Health Service Commission Corps, which consists of approximately 6,000 health professionals. We also are giving backup assistance to the 500-bed ship Comfort for the United States Navy. Americans all over are calling up and asking what they can do. The best thing they can do is respond to this great call by volunteering to give blood. We need Americans to continue to answer that call. No matter where you live, please do your civic duty and assist us by donating blood. It is our primary job is to make sure Americans harmed by this tragedy get the help that they need. We will remain in constant contact with the governors, the mayors, public health officials, and other local officials to make sure that all their needs are being met. It is a sad day, but America and all of its citizens certainly share tonight in the grief that has been caused. And as the President and everybody in his administration have said, we, the government, will continue to operate and continue to provide the services to all Americans.
One of the most cherished freedoms is the freedom of movement, the ability to move freely and safely. But today that freedom was attacked. But we will restore that freedom throughout the national transportation system as soon as possible, and we will restore the highest possible degree of service. These terrorist acts are designed to steal the confidence of Americans. We will restore that confidence. We have already taken some first steps as a precaution.
And so while this is going on at the White House, this is what's happening at the Capitol of the United States. Dinah Hassert, the Speaker of the House, has begun talking as congressmen and senators gather.
One thing that happens here in this place is when American suffers and when people perpetrate acts against this country, we as a Congress and as a government stand united, and we stand together. Senators and House members, Democrats and Republicans will stand shoulder to shoulder. Perpetrated on this nation. We will stand together to make sure that those who have brought forth this evil deed will pay the price. We're not sure who this is yet. But we have our suspicions. And when that is justified and when those suspicions are justified, we will act. We will stand with the President, we will stand with this government, and we will stand as Americans together through this time. Thank you.
Now on the steps of the Capitol, Tom Dasher, the Senate Majority Leader.
Today's despicable acts were an assault on our people and on our freedom. As the representatives of the people, we are here to declare that our resolve has not been weakened by these horrific and cowardly acts. Congress will convene tomorrow. And we will speak with one voice to condemn these attacks, to comfort the victims and their families, to commit our full support to the effort to bring those responsible to justice. We, Republicans and Democrats, House and Senate, stand strongly united behind the President and will work together to ensure that the full resources of the government are brought to bear in these efforts. Our heartfelt thoughts and our fervent prayers are with the injured and the families of those who have been lost.
We know, as a nation, as we said, our thoughts and prayers are with those families and those injured and those who are the casualties of today's attack. We also remember those thousands of people who are rescue workers. We ask now that we all bow our heads in a moment of silence and remembrance.
Hundreds of members of Congress. We can't say that every member of Congress in the House and Senate was there, but hundreds were there in a show of solidarity and support, a show of unity in the face of a sneak attack, the second in the lifetime of many of us, a sneak attack on the United States, this time by the shadowy personages who are part of the terrorism operation. There are a number of terrorism operations in the world. Osama bin Laden has been the focal point since 1998 of U.S. intelligence suspicions, but we've said it before, we repeat it without apology. No one knows who is responsible for these dastardly acts today. 3 of the World Trade Center buildings, the 2 Twin Towers and Building 7, destroyed at the World Trade Center. The Pentagon, dead, wounded, and destruction there. Now, coverage of the attack on America continues, including President Bush's address shortly, so stay right here with us. Continuing now our live CBS Evening News coverage of the attack on America from CBS News World Headquarters in New York. 4 commercial jets hijacked and deliberately crashed today. 3 of them hit buildings, 2 the World Trade Center Twin Towers. A 3rd hit the Pentagon. The 4th hijacked airliner went down in southwestern Pennsylvania. New York's towering World Trade Center reduced to rubble. The Pentagon smashed and smoking. Uncounted thousands of people apparently dead or injured. In New York, it's described as a catastrophe in terms of dead and happening right now. Rescue workers are scrambling through the war zone remains of Lower Manhattan as well as the Pentagon itself. On a normal day, up to 50,000 people worked in the Twin Towers alone, and many thousands of visitors went through each day. Casualty figures elsewhere include the more than 250 passengers and crew on the 4 hijacked jets, and perhaps 100 dead and injured at least at the Pentagon. But there are few places in the air tonight anywhere in the United States. There are few planes in the air anywhere, because the FAA has grounded all civilian aircraft until at least noon tomorrow. Nothing is supposed to fly until at least noon tomorrow, when the FAA will have some further information. By the way, the stock exchanges will also be closed tomorrow. President Bush will address the nation from Washington tonight. It originally was scheduled for 9 o'clock Eastern Time. We're told that that will be moved up some. Exactly when the President has now decided to speak, we do not know. We expect it at any time, and we will, of course, carry it live here. President Bush has already promised to, quote, find and punish whoever carried out these cowardly attacks, and federal officials say, not all of the intelligence agencies, but some federal officials say they, quote, strongly suspect that renegade Saudi millionaire Osama bin Laden may have been involved, but there's no confirmation of that whatsoever. And if you're concerned about hearing some reports of U.S. missile strikes in Kabul, Afghanistan, didn't happen. According to senior U.S. officials, what happened in Kabul, Afghanistan, the pictures of explosion and fire there, had nothing to do with any U.S. missile attacks. There haven't been any U.S. missile attacks. While at least one news organization reported that missiles had hit Kabul, Afghanistan, it turns out to be not true. CBS News correspondent Scott Pelley is at the site of today's attacks in Lower Manhattan tonight. And as night falls, Scott, what's the situation there?
Dan, as you can see, the smoke is still rising on Lower Manhattan Island as night falls here. We have spent most of the day with firemen, paramedics, and police officers near the World Trade Center towers. One of the firefighters told us that he didn't see any bodies in the area. He just saw pieces of bodies. Pieces of bodies, he told us, in the street, on the sidewalks. I asked him if he could give us some idea of how many bodies, and he just shook his head sadly and said, far too numerous to have any idea. We have spent a great deal of time with the firefighters. They all describe a scene of overwhelming devastation near Ground Zero at the base of the World Trade Center towers. Firefighters describe bodies in the streets, bodies on the sidewalks, pieces of bodies everywhere. One New York City police chief said, "No one has ever seen anything like this unless they were at Dresden in World War II."
It's a terrible thing. It's like the world is evil, definitely.
1 block from the base of the World Trade Center tower, the inferno burned 4 hours after the attack. Police cars, the first to respond, were incinerated by the collapse of the second tower. Many firefighters and officers were wounded in the collapse, perhaps killed. No one can say how many.
No idea how many people and cops are dead. We have many people hurt.
What about the casualties? What have you seen?
Uncountable. Let's go, let's go.
Courageous firefighters responded from all over New York City, called from off-duty, called from vacation. Renee Davila was the first EMS supervisor at the scene.
I was there, and I saw the building collapse. We all started running. I ended up inside the Hilton somewhere. I was like trapped. I don't know where I was. I couldn't find my way out with all the smoke and the debris in there. I finally just closed the door behind me and covered it so no more smoke and debris would come in. And what I did was I called my wife. I told her I love her.
Anybody want to volunteer?
Many New Yorkers rushed downtown to volunteer. These construction workers were from Iron Workers Local 40.
What's the job in there?
Whatever it is.
Whatever it is, to save somebody, one person saved is a life saved.
Through the day, an inferno raged in World Trade Center Building Number 7, another massive office tower. Firefighters feared that it would collapse, and a little more than 8 hours after the attack, the abandoned building fell. 47 stories in the street. This is what's left of the carefully organized files and lives that were the World Trade Center. Bits of paper blasted into the street, construction dust 1 inch or 2 inches deep everywhere you look. What's eerie about this place now, several hours after the initial disaster, is just how quiet it is. You don't hear any ambulances racing away from the World Trade Center anymore.
I saw many injuries.
Hundreds, thousands.
My eyesight did not see hundreds and thousands. I know that my heart and my brain tells me they were hundreds.
One of the sites that we noticed near Ground Zero tonight, it is election day in New York City, a primary election, and near a community center, someone had handwritten a sign that said, "Vote here." Right below that sign, someone had scrawled another that said, "Emergency shelter." Dan?
Scott Pelley in Lower Manhattan. The primary mayoral election in New York was canceled today. The White House has now informed us that President Bush, moving up his time to speak, is now scheduled to speak to the American public, and for that matter to the world, at 8:30 Eastern Time, less than an hour from now. 8:30 Eastern Time, President Bush will be addressing the nation. That, of course, would be 7:30 in the Central Time Zone, and even earlier, of course, out west. 8:30 now, the time for President's address. One thing that Attorney General Ashcroft mentioned that my colleague Anthony Mason picked up on, one piece of new information out of that briefing. Ashcroft said that the first plane to hit the World Trade Center, that was American Airlines Flight 11, which is taken off from Boston, was supposed to go to Los Angeles. Attorney General Ashcroft said that that plane, they believe, was hijacked through the use of knives or knives kind of equipment. Now, that would correspond to an earlier report when someone said Barbara Olson, not someone in authority, said that Barbara Olson, the wife of the Solicitor General of the United States, who was aboard the plane that hit the Pentagon, that she, on cell phone, had described the skyjackers, the hijackers, these terrorists, as trying to take over the plane with knife-like instruments. So now we have two reports on what the Attorney General based his saying that the first plane was also hijacked by knives. We do not know, but now there are indications that at least two of the planes, at a minimum in the early stages, were hijacked with the use of knives or knives-like equipment of some kind. Now, the World Trade Center is in the heart of Lower Manhattan's financial district. It's one reason it was selected as a symbolic target. The attack not only toppled the once majestic towers, it also staggered the struggling U.S. economy and the stock markets. CBS News business correspondent Anthony Mason is here with that part of the story. Anthony, put this in perspective for us.
Dan, to begin with, all U.S. markets were closed today and will remain closed tomorrow. Make no mistake, among the primary targets of this attack were both the financial community and our economy.
It will remain closed through tomorrow, and the post office says the U.S. mail will be slowed, but will keep coming.
From California on another part of the country, from Minnesota out to the west. There are no time zones in the country today. One thing that David Wright mentioned there about baseball canceling game, this is the first time since the D-Day invasion that Major League Baseball has canceled all of its game. The first time since D-Day in the Second World War that Major League Baseball has canceled all of its game. I was very struck earlier today by what David McCullough, the noted and popular and wise historian, said when he said it's warfare 21st century style, and reminding all of us in the country who listen and read him that we haven't seen such destruction as this on our home ground, as he put it, since the Civil War. And one girl in that report saying, of course, Americans in many cases are just simply not prepared for this. ABC's Dean Reynolds is in Chicago today. And Dean, I don't quite understand what it is you have, and we'll come back to the mood of Chicago in just a moment, but there was another incident involving a plane today.
That's right, Peter. They didn't know it at the time, but the pilot and all of the passengers aboard TWA flight number 3, bound from New York's John F. Kennedy Airport to St. Louis, came perilously close to one of those planes that crashed into the World Trade Center. So close that New York Air Control told a TWA jet to take evasive action to avoid a collision.
You dodged one of the aircraft that hit the tower?
Well, he was up there whenever we were coming from New York, so what we had to do was, they were not talking to him, and he was changing his heading and his altitude, so they just cleared us to deviate however we had to stay away from him.
It was right after they had taken off, and the passengers were horrified.
I thought we were going to crash. I thought the plane was going to crash, because when we took off, the plane kind of went down and came back up, it was kind of shaking. And it wasn't your normal taking off routine. And then you could just see like a plane that just kind of just bypassed us really close. And I said maybe it was just a mere miss.
We had him in sight, so it was a nice day in New York. We were out of the clouds, which helped a lot, so we just, dodged him.
As the TWA jet ascended, others aboard said they could see a terrible sight below.
Then when we got really high up, my brother's a fireman, and so I said, doesn't it look like the Trade Center's on fire? And he says, yeah, it does. It looks like a big fire.
Now, the passengers told us, Peter, that after consulting with the pilot, the flight attendants pushed the food trays up against the cockpit door, apparently to guard against a possible hijacking. In any event, the plane continued on uneventfully until it was ordered to land at Dayton, Ohio, and it landed safely.
Stay with me for just 1 second, Dean, because if you weren't with this all day, there was a time this morning when the Federal Aviation Administration first of all, didn't allow anybody to take off, and then ordered all planes in the air over the United States to land immediately at the nearest airport, which was how a plane which begins in New York and is going west ends up in Dayton, Ohio. Dean, now can we just talk a little bit about Illinois and the central part of the country? One of the very first things that happened today was the Sears Tower in Chicago was closed. What else happened there, and what other sense of that part of the country do you now have?
Well, I got to O'Hare Airport shortly after the attack on the World Trade Center, and of course it was basically a ghost town, except for everybody standing outside the airport waiting to get cabs elsewhere because nothing was going out of the airport. When I got into town, again, there were very few pedestrians. It was almost all police walking along the sidewalks, checking all of the state, federal, county buildings to see if there were any bombs. The police were checking to see if there were any missing buses or trucks. It was very tense here. Now, as the day has progressed, it looks as though life is returning to normal here, at least in Chicago, in the Loop area.
Thanks very much, Dean Reynolds in Chicago. We'll come back to you just to give you again some sense of the magnitude of this. The Reuters news agency reporting out of Toronto tonight makes the point that the tarmacs of airports all across Canada, from Vancouver in the west to Goose Bay in Labrador, jumping off spot if you're going to Europe, are crowded with aircraft which are either moving back and forth across the United States or across Canada or going to or from Europe. We're just all told to land. And so in all of those airports tonight, there is a huge number of aircraft, and the FAA is simply going to keep them on the ground at least for the next 12 hours and maybe longer. There was a passenger on a Northwest Airlines flight which was bound for Detroit and which was ordered by the FAA or their company to divert to Vancouver. The captain on board told the people that there was a mechanical problem, it wasn't a great issue, but they're going to Vancouver. When they got on the ground, he apologized to them for lying to them under the circumstances. It seems like the obvious thing to do. But all domestic flights in Canada were canceled as airports were closed down because nobody had the vaguest idea whether or not there was something else going on up there. And earlier today, you may recall that we heard the British Prime Minister Tony Blair talking about this, and it wasn't long before I don't know of any other European city involved, but certainly he ordered that aircraft should not be allowed to fly in the airspace over London. And so this was repeated time and time and time again in a variety of places. But in just one place, St. John's International Airport in Newfoundland, which is a pretty small place, has taken in 27 aircraft today with 5,000 passengers. That may be St. John's, New Brunswick. I'm not altogether sure it's St. John's, Newfoundland, St. John's, New Brunswick. And it may be either in New Brunswick. But you just get some sense of aircraft just being ordered to bail out from wherever they're going and to get on the ground. John Nance, our aviation analyst, is with us. And John, it's probably you should be talking much more about this than I am. But add some more to this general overall air crisis today.
The only time, Peter, that we have ever in our history, certainly in the jet age, ever had a situation in which jetliners were parked all over the place was in the air traffic control strike of 1981, when we had basically a cessation of services by most of the air traffic controllers, but not all of them. Even then, there were still flights flying. This is unprecedented except for that time in history, and even going back into the latter days after World War II, I'm not aware of any time that we put all the air traffic on the ground.
John, I'm just looking at how widespread this is. It says here 34 flights were diverted to Vancouver, 25 were diverted to Toronto, one was diverted to Whitehorse, which is in the Canadian Yukon, in the Yukon, and after the plane reported communications and fuel difficulty. This must have just been the most, we know what we're dealing with in terms of tragedy and casualty and chaos, but it must have just been an unbelievable day for the aviation authorities.
Well, totally chaotic in every possible way. One thing that we can be very thankful for is that a number of years ago, the FAA established a central control system, which is now housed in Herndon, Virginia. It's like a mission control. We've actually, we had cameras there on New Year's Eve back there on the Millennium. But this gives us the capability of coordinating all the air traffic control centers, all the control towers throughout North America, and being able to shut the system down. But imagine the air crews on those flight decks trying to get an idea of why in the world they're being told to land someplace other than their destination. The confusion factor there alone has got to be horrendous, especially the fact that when you're told to land at any suitable airport, not every airliner can land everywhere, and there are a lot of decisions that have to be made very rapidly.
John, when
the air traffic...
My apologies, I'm terribly sorry, go on.
No, all I was saying was that the radio traffic that has to occur between the pilots and their company to find out where in the world the dispatcher wants you to go, that alone was a monstrous problem, certainly for American and Delta and United and all the big airlines.
Now, you're a pilot, a commercial pilot as well, flown for major airlines, Alaska Airways, as I recall.
That's right.
You're a commercial pilot in an aircraft today. Does your company tell you from the ground that not one but 2 and perhaps 3 aircraft in the country have been hijacked? And what do you do then?
I really am going to be interested to know whether or not that information was passed that way. Usually you're just given a command and not told the reason why, because there's too much concern that broadcasting that out over radio frequencies may somehow exacerbate the problem. You know, you're in unknown territory. But I would imagine that there were enough out there who were told that the level of tension was very high.
John,
certainly you're going to be looking at your door.
When we heard that one case of the drinks trolley being brought up and pushed against the cabin door by the members of the crew of one particular aircraft because they clearly had some sense of what was going on. John, what have you managed to learn throughout the day in terms of the aircraft which ultimately were crashed with that enormous loss of life? Anything to add there?
Well, only this, Peter. We touched on it briefly before, and that is the tantalizing clue, if you will, that we have 2 Boeing 757s and 2 Boeing 767s, and those are subject to what we call a common type rating. In other words, if you're trained in one, you can fly the other. Boeing built them that way to minimize training differentials in the airline business. Perhaps that's simply coincidental, and perhaps it's very pointed here in terms of how this was planned. These aircraft, too, when you consider the amount of fuel that was on board transatlantic or transcontinental flights, and we have to consider that there's a high probability that these flights were selected because they would have a lot of fuel, you wouldn't have to put extra explosives on, and you could create a flying bomb that not only involves 300 to 400,000 pounds with a kinetic energy of 200 to 250 knots or greater, but also the, not explosive, but the burning power, incendiary power of all that fuel, which we saw do these horrible things in the Trade Center case.
So as you look at these events today, these 2 events, which are really 3 events, which are really 4 events if you consider the 4th crash.
Yes, indeed, 4.
And the amount of fuel and the explosive power, as we certainly saw at the Pentagon and at the trade towers, do you think anybody would have needed to take additional explosives on board? There was enough explosion potential in the gasoline itself.
I think I wouldn't be surprised when we finally get this unraveled, Peter, if there was a structural engineer on the other side of the world that had been very much involved in planning this. Because those decisions would have involved what does it take to bring down that structure in each particular case. I think that this was probably something not left to chance, but it also is a very wise thing if you're going to do a hellacious act like this to figure, well, we don't have to put additional explosives in. We make the airplane a flying bomb simply by which one we select.
Thank you very much, John Nance, and we shall come back to you. What we're looking at here, of course, is a videotape from a variety of different angles today. All of it just repeatedly bringing home the horror of the attack on the trade towers. We did not see the aircraft. We've seen no evidence of any video of the aircraft actually hitting the Pentagon. It came from the south. We do know that the people on board were aware they'd been hijacked because the wife of the Solicitor General of the United States, the administration's lawyer basically, argues cases before the Supreme Court, was on board one of them and died, of course, along with all of the other people, and describes a pretty horrifying circumstances of being aware that they had been made hostages, no longer passengers. And we also had an eyewitness report from the vicinity of the Pentagon earlier today, which said the aircraft came in very low, and it had to come in very low because the Pentagon's only a 6-story building, John McCarthy told us at the Pentagon, and was knocking off lampposts, or sorry, power posts, telephone posts, as it came up from the south to attack that. In the middle, I want to talk to our medical editor, Dr. Tim Johnson, about how great the need may really be for this disaster tonight in medical terms. The Attorney General has been talking about it. First, I want to go to Midtown at ABC, Midtown, New York City, that is, and ABC's Diane Sawyer. Diane?
Peter, I don't know how much you can see down here, but we have heavy mobilization. We have cranes coming in. We have bulldozers, generators, lights coming in because, of course, city power is out. I'm told they're coming in part to uncover the rubble from a subway station that partially collapsed. Also, they're going to take a look at the rubble closer up. If you can move the camera in, you can see the gray haze, which is the smoke from what is still burning. Not only the rubble of the 2 tall towers this morning that were blasted, but also that third building, the 47-story Tishman building, which had been evacuated. And then we're told that the Marriott Hotel is still on fire, but firefighters have given up on that right now. So right now, building's still on fire, everybody evacuated out there. I'm going to bring in Don Baylor once more for a couple of footnotes for this scene, Peter, because he's been walking the streets all day.
Ask him to
Don,
speak
you saw a jet engine. You saw a turbine engine.
Yeah, it was obviously an engine from a large jet that is over on the left-hand side about 2 blocks down this way. It landed on what I think was a phone booth, but it was charred. Obviously, the insides, it did not have the outer shell anymore, but it looked like the inner workings of a jet engine.
And again, we're talking blocks and blocks away, Peter, so imagine the trajectory of that engine's flight. Another thing you told me, which has such a poignancy to it, you said when you walked the scene up at the Trade Center devastation, that you were knee-deep in a carpet of financial documents.
Right, well, we were talking about the implications of this on world markets, this being probably the center of the world of finance, and that was nowhere was that more dramatically demonstrated than what were millions and millions of documents. I looked at financial documents, stock certificates, employment records, just lying around. Many of them were charred. It's obvious. And when you saw the explosion, you saw a cascade of paper come off these buildings, and that's what it was.
We're told it's as far away as 3 miles, Peter. And I should just say that every time you stop here, someone comes up from the EMS or from the firefighters and the police just to tell you the names of people they know who went in before them and they're not sure came out.
Thanks very much, Diane. So I must tell you, for the future, it's very hard to hear you down there because of the emergency equipment that's working in Midtown. I'm sure your engineers will tell you if we could move you just a little bit away from that, we'd like very much to hear as clearly as we can, obviously, under the circumstances, what you are saying. Just thinking for a second there about the thousands of people who are outside the country. When you think that one airport in eastern Canada had 27 aircraft and 5,000 people, and it's happening all the way across the continent, people stranded tonight. And one assumes, though, the cell phone network in the United States, at least today, certainly in the eastern United States, was jammed with people trying to make calls related to this incident, the press, government officials, emergency officials. One assumes, because we haven't got any phone numbers for you, I'm afraid, of people in other places tonight who are expected to be somewhere else, and they all appear, as far as we can tell by the reporting that we're getting from a variety of places, are okay. They're just spending a night in some place they did not intend to be. We've had a couple of chances today to talk to Jerry Hauer, who is the man who set up New York City's emergency headquarters on the west side of Manhattan, right down there by the trade towers, which is no longer usable today because it was, if not one of the first, one of the early victims of these 2 extraordinary collapses of the 2 trade tower buildings. But he's with us again tonight. Jerry, grateful that you came back. You just tell us what you know that's going on.
Well, there's a massive effort underway right now, Peter, to get medical resources into the city. As you heard earlier, Secretary Thompson has mobilized a number of Department of Health and Human Services, DMAT teams, DMORT teams, which are the mortuary teams. They are bringing in the Comfort, which is a naval ship that is a hospital ship that will help provide resources and much needed beds. Joe Albaugh, the director of FEMA, is coordinating the federal government's effort to assist the city and Washington, D.C. And there will be numerous urban search and rescue teams coming into the city to aid with dogs, with search equipment, to aid New York City's firefighters, because clearly this is going to be a long-term operation. Our firefighters here in the city, our police and emergency medical services have been absolutely heroic today in their efforts. A number of them have become victims in the process today in trying to rescue people in these buildings. And the fatigue will set in, but they are the consummate professionals. They will do everything they can to continue to try and search for victims. But there will come a point very soon where once the fire is out, they will start to pick through the rubble.
Jerry, let me interrupt you and even be more specific, if I may. Mike Carter is the vice president of the Firefighters Union, estimates that half of the 400 firefighters who first reached the scene at the trade tower may be dead. And here's what he says: we have entire companies that are just missing. We have lost chiefs. And Cardinal Edward Egan, the Roman Catholic cardinal in New York City, who administered the last rites to a dozen victims, said the firefighters and the police were dead in great numbers. Now, I don't mean to reach out for numbers except to quantify the scope of this disaster, much of which we can see on our face. But what can you add to those two comments?
Well, first of all, many of those people, the chiefs that I heard on the radio as I was listening to this evolve are very close personal friends. Many of the police officers, the emergency service unit, these are the people that were the first responders, the first two rescue units, the first two fire units. We're all in the building either doing rescues or firefighting, and they transmitted a third alarm almost immediately, which is upwards of 150 to maybe 200 firefighters, and then they rapidly brought in more resources. They transmitted a fifth alarm and then an additional fifth alarm. So there were hundreds and hundreds of firefighters and police officers trying to save the people in those buildings. And to try and quantify it at this point, how many people?
No, I didn't mean to make you do that. I just want to know whether or not you you were aware of what the head of the Firefighters Union and Cardinal Egan had said in terms of the dimension of the disaster for the fire department.
Absolutely, and some very, very senior people in the fire department are missing. There's some very senior chiefs, some of the specialty units, the rescue units. Same in the police department. Some of the senior police officials, the inspectors that were on the scene, the emergency service units. These people are true heroes that were going in and paid the ultimate sacrifice in trying to rescue New Yorkers.
Now, let me ask you one other thing. The mayor has gone out of his way today to say there are 170 hospitals in New York, and we know that one of them, St. Vincent's, was pretty much overwhelmed today, and one of them was put briefly out of operations because it lost its gas, or it lost its power temporarily. But now the Attorney General comes along and says they are sending 4 disaster medical teams to New York and also 3 to the Pentagon. Is there some suggestion here that New York, under the present circumstances, can't handle this by itself? Well, I think that a couple of things. First of all, the number of burn beds in New York is not that significant, and there will be and are quite a number of burn victims. There is going to be a need to do constant triage. There's going to be need to support the relief effort, the search and rescue effort. And the hospitals have been overwhelmed. These teams will help with triage of the walking wounded. There are still a lot of people being triaged, and it will provide some relief to the hospitals, to the hospital workers who are going to be working around the clock to deal with these very critically injured patients. And perhaps, thank you very much, Jerry. I really appreciate the time you've given us today. I know you had to walk up here to our newsroom on the west side of New York, a heck of a long way from this disaster, and of course we are all insulated from the absolute intensity of it by working in newsroom. But perhaps the most ominous statement tonight, I think, at this stage comes from Dr. Bruce Logan, who was the chief of medicine at NYU Downtown Hospital, and he told the Reuters news agency The vast majority of victims have still not gotten here. The hospital staff is really pulling together, but the worst, said Dr. Logan, I'm afraid, is still to come. I think everybody knows. We talked to a lawyer. What was his name? Tom? I apologize for forgetting his name. Tom Humphreys, who worked on the 47th, 48th floor, 57th floor, thanks, John, 57th floor of Tower Number 1, the northern tower at the World Trade Center. And he was in it when the first aircraft hit that tower, and he said all things were pretty calm given the circumstances, and many people in that tower managed to evacuate the building. And it was pretty early in the morning, and a lot of people hadn't come to work, as far as he was concerned. And even some people from the higher floors, underneath he was certainly scared of the explosion. He wasn't sure if people came from above those floors. Managed to make a fairly orderly evacuation from the building. And that's given people reason to hope today that the casualty numbers that might have been anticipated, given the 50,000 people work in the Trade Center, may have been lower. But the answer is we simply do not know.
Peter,
sorry, Don.
I just spoke to people at the office of the Chief Medical Examiner of the New York City morgue, where they only have 8 fatalities so far. They are bracing for so many more. Even among the 8 they have, one of them is a high-ranking member of the fire department. Another is a close personal friend of mine and of Jerry Howard's. And among the unaccounted for at the scene are a police chief, high-ranking chief, and 62 members of the police department's forward rescue unit, the emergency service squad, that they still haven't been able to locate.
It does focus very clearly on what Mayor Giuliani said when asked what his single overwhelming emotion was at the moment. He said all the people in those buildings who I actually knew. And this is a scene being repeated, of course, at the Pentagon today, where we have no estimate of the casualties there. And John McCarthy, our Pentagon correspondent, very wisely said to us there was simply no way that anybody was going to speculate about this at the moment, but that there were, that this aircraft slammed into a newish part of the Pentagon that had just been refurbished. We'll get to that clearly as quickly as we can, but deal with one thing at a time. Our medical editor, Tim Johnson, is here. Tim, we've heard mentioned several times very early on that burn victims here had gone as far away as burn centers in Canada, some of which are very efficient and well known. Is New York, at least in terms of burn centers, overwhelmed, not able? Do you have any sense of this?
Well, I would guess it might well be, because burns are among the most difficult and demanding of all trauma injuries to take care of. Demanding in terms of personnel, of medical resources, of space, long-term care. The two huge, overwhelming problem with severe burns are fluid loss, which can lead to shock and quick death, and then long-term infection. Enormous problems taking care of the infections that result with serious burns. And so the care of these people really is something that demands long-term care and a lot of resources and a lot of personnel, and it can very quickly overwhelm even a major city like New York.
And so New York may have an adequate number of burn centers, but not
for the ordinary burn cases that occur in everyday life, but not for the kinds of injuries and numbers that may come out of this.
And the most middle-sized cities, which might have been what we call the tri-state area, New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, have burn centers?
They have burn centers, but limited numbers of beds in most of those cities. We're going to have to talk about major cities, Boston, Chicago, cities in Canada, elsewhere, to take care of numbers that might well come out of this kind of a disaster.
And we're going to go to the triage center in a moment and talk to ABC's Cynthia McFadden, who's been there waiting like so many other people. But explain to people again just basically what happens in triage. It's a question of selecting who to take care of and who to put aside.
Absolutely. You have limited resources by definition, and you have to decide who is most likely to benefit from those resources. Some you can put aside for later care. Others are so near death that any care is not going to be possible, so you focus on the ones that need immediate emergency care and have a chance of survival.
And it must be one of the toughest decisions that a doctor ever has to make.
It is. I worked in an emergency room for 15 years, and that is among the toughest decisions, of course.
I believe, by the way, and this is particularly relevant to the New York audience, we won't necessarily find the phone number here, but when Mayor Giuliani and the police commissioner and the fire commissioner, the head of the FBI in New York, and the governor were all giving a news conference some time ago, after the mayor had said, everybody don't feel any hate and anger, be New Yorkers, pull together, and the governor had said, that we will, of course, get through this. He did point out that there was a true, genuine need for blood donors. And then I think we heard exactly the same thing from Attorney General Ashcroft, who said that anybody in the country who wanted to participate or felt they could give something One of the things was to contact their local Red Cross center because, as we know, there's a shortage of blood in the country, and the governor also said that they like it if doctors volunteered and nurses volunteered. Now, there's a catastrophic shortage of nurses in the country, and the burden that will be on doctors and nurses here. The military, Tim and John, as pretty much as I understand, they're getting civilian help at the Pentagon as well. The military pretty much is able to take care of its own under most circumstances, right?
It is, and the majority of injuries in the military, and I suspect the majority of injuries from this tragedy today will be crush injuries of various sorts. Again, burns are in a very special category requiring very special kinds of care, and that's going to be a real issue.
We also know, and I think we actually can give you some sense of this already, that 3 ships of the U.S. Navy are on their way to New York, one of which, the USS Comfort, is a hospital ship with 1,100 beds on its way, dispatched by the Health and Human Services and the military. And the aircraft carrier, the USS John F. Kennedy and the George Washington, are coming as well, on their way from farther down the East Coast to be put in New York Harbor lest they are needed for a variety of reasons. And these aircraft carriers, particularly, and the Comfort, are hugely capable of taking care of casualties in a wide variety of ways. Hang on, Dr. Tim, we'll come back to you in just a second. But I do want to go to Cynthia McFadden, who is at the triage center itself. Cynthia, do you hear me?
I do, Peter.
So just bring us up to date with what's happened there since we last checked you.
Well, Peter, we're still standing by waiting. There are still hundreds of doctors and nurses here waiting. The grim realities are that they expect to tag hundreds, perhaps thousands of victims of this explosion throughout the night tonight. The reason the ambulances are still sitting empty at this point is because we understand from rescue workers they have not been able to get close enough to the actual midpoint of the explosion to actually bring anybody out, which is the reason that they are still standing by. They've told us the system here, Peter, I heard you talking about setting up a triage system. The system here will be as follows. Victims who come in and are tagged red are victims that they believe can be saved. Victims who are tagged yellow and green are walking wounded and will be quickly taken away to other locations. And then there are the black tags for those people who they feel they cannot help.
Thanks, Cynthia. We'll come back to you. I want to go quickly to Stoystown, Pennsylvania, the one where ABC's Dan Harris is standing by. 4 aircraft involved today, and we know that on each one of them there was a hijacking in process. And the aircraft that crashed near Johnstown, Pennsylvania, was United Flight 93 with 38 passengers and 7 crew on board. ABC's Dan Harris rushed to the scene of that accident, and I hope is with us now. Dan, do you hear me?
Peter, I do hear you. And we have a new piece of information on this crash from ABC's Lisa Stark, who, as you know, covers aviation for ABC News. She tells us that Flight 93, which, as you mentioned, was departing from Newark and headed to San Francisco, filed for a change of flight plan request, requesting to change its destination from San Francisco to Washington. Shortly after that, it turned around and crashed about a mile from where we are right now in Stoystown, Pennsylvania. It crashed, and I believe we have some pictures of the crash scene. Crashed in an open field. All that you really see there is a huge crater. You can't even see it very well from our vantage point. A huge black gaping hole, as investigators are describing it. There is a lot of debris, most of it very small pieces of black charred remains. The FBI tonight is making a huge grid, and tomorrow morning it will begin what it calls a painstaking process of gathering the evidence. At this point, they say they're treating this as a crime, though they won't go so far as to say it is indeed an act of terrorism. If indeed the plane had successfully turned around and headed back toward Washington, and now it appears there would have been one more target. It did not make it, which is fortunate for Washington, unfortunate for the 45 people on board. No survivors, Peter.
Dan, it was indeed a chilling moment when you made a reference there to United Flight 93 asking for a change of flight plan, headed for San Francisco, asking for a flight plan that takes it to Washington. Have you picked up anything else on the ground tonight?
We have picked up from the FBI that there was 911 contact from the plane. Now, they wouldn't go so far as to confirm a report that has been circulating. The report says that one of the passengers locked himself in the bathroom of that plane and called 911 at 9:58 a.m., got in touch with a local 911 operator in this part of Pennsylvania, southwestern Pennsylvania, and told him there had been some sort of explosion on the plane. Shortly after that, 2 minutes later, in fact, the plane did go down. That report is not confirmed in total in some. However, the FBI says it has received tapes of a 911 call, and it is going to go over those tapes.
Just help us place Stoystown, Pennsylvania, a little more, with a little greater familiarity to people. You're fairly close to Johnstown?
We are fairly close to Johnstown. Stoystown is about 75 miles southeast of Pittsburgh and about 30 miles north of Maryland. It's a very rural area, and the area where the crash happened is really very, very rural. It's an open field, and as I said, there is a huge crater. There were some eyewitnesses, coal workers, who ran to the scene shortly after the crash. We've heard that they saw the plane going down. It was very unstable before it went down, as you might imagine. People who live nearby say they heard the ground, they felt the ground shake miles away. People who went to the scene, we spoke to one eyewitness a short time ago, said she saw lots of debris, but nothing very big. And in fact, that's what our pictures are bearing out, that the debris is very, very small. This made a very hard landing, Peter.
Thanks very much, Dan Harris in Stoystown, Pennsylvania tonight on the United Airlines flight, which started off from Newark to San Francisco, took off about 8:01. You see where it all converges? The first attack on the trade tower is just before 9 o'clock. The second one is after that an aircraft goes down at, sometime 8:35, between 8:30, maybe a little after 9 o'clock. And so the coordination involved in this has intelligence and military officials tonight confused, shocked, and steamed.
Almost the prequel.
Very politely, I left, came back here, and boom, he's probably dead.
And as he sat watching the building burn, Coleman could see tiny black specks near the top floors. They were people jumping off instead of being burned alive.
I must have seen 10 or 15 people come down, one after another. Off what appeared to be the top.
The bombings today brought one horrific scene after another.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
But rescuers know once they get closer to what's left of the Twin Towers, the images are sure to get worse.
But the workers, for many of them, though, they are still waiting. We are told now, Dan, that firefighters are trying to stretch ladders out across some of the debris to begin putting out some of the fires that have been burning all day long. But active search and rescue efforts are still on hold at this hour. There is still hope here tonight, but for the moment, it's being tempered by an overwhelming sense of helplessness. Dan.
Lee Cowan, one of our many reporters covering in Lower Manhattan. The terror attacks on the World Trade Center struck deep into the hearts of New Yorkers. Many were witness to or victims of this cowardly act of mass destruction. CBS's Mika Brzezinski has been out among them on the streets of New York.
There was terror in the streets while the Twin Towers burned. With gridlock on the ground, crowds watched from afar and prayed.
You don't see people jumping from the windows.
Police jumped into life away from danger.
Let's go!
But not far enough. One after another, the towers fell to pieces, debris falling onto hundreds of onlookers. Somewhere behind the billow of smoke, an American icon had disappeared, transforming the New York skyline forever. On the sidelines, people watched and wept. Others, covered in soot and debris, counted their blessings. Even now, no one can guess the number of dead and wounded. Adding to the confusion, cell service was crippled, cutting the lifeline for families trying to locate loved ones. Only a few could get through.
It's gonna be okay.
Nearby schools evacuated so quickly parents had no idea where to go to find their children. Everywhere there was terror and confusion.
Everybody please start walking towards the east side.
Finally, people simply walked away from Lower Manhattan. An eerie calm prevailed as police evacuated the area. Cell phone service for much of New York City is still somewhat crippled, though the situation is getting better. Several forms of transportation have been affected. Several subway lines are suspended indefinitely, and train service out of the city is limited. It will be no business as usual for school kids in New York City tomorrow. All New York City public schools are closed, at least for tomorrow. And the mayor of New York said earlier today, stay home and stay calm. At least try. Dan.
Mika Brzezinski. The specter is being raised tonight of hundreds and perhaps thousands, that's a quote from one New York City official, hundreds, perhaps thousands of people being, in effect, buried alive by the avalanche of destruction which developed in the wake of the two planes hitting the World Trade Centers today. Keep in mind that some rescue workers, firemen and policemen early on the scene were believed to have been killed. They've been unable to put out all the fires, much less get into the rubble and look for possible survivors in the rubble. That's the reality of this dark night in New York City. Now an eyewitness report from one of our own. Minutes after the initial attacks on the World Trade Center towers, CBS News correspondent Carol Maureen was on the scene, just in time for a frighteningly close encounter with catastrophe.
As I'm making my way toward the Trade Center, along the water line, thousands of people were walking towards me, streaming out, almost not talking, trying to get through on cell phones that didn't work. Some of them crying, all of them looking pretty agonized. All of a sudden I heard a roar and I saw one of the towers blow and then collapse and fill the horizon with smoke, and I yelled, "Oh my God." And I saw from street level, as though it had exploded up, a giant rolling ball of flame, and the firefighters screamed, "Run." And I turned to run, but I fell, and I felt someone scoop me up, tell me to throw my high heels off, and I was running in my stocking feet with him. And finally, as we ran and ran, he slammed me into a wall and covered my body with his. I could feel his heart beating against my backbone. And I think both of us were sure we were dead, because there was no way you could run fast enough and there was no way to avoid it. But somehow we escaped the flame, which was immediately followed by a storm of debris. We were breathing, it felt like giant particles of plaster, and there was smoke, so that if you tried to put your hand out in front of you, you couldn't really see it. It was the thickest, most intense particle and smoke I've ever been in. And somewhere along the line, the firefighter handed me off to a New York police officer. The thing that struck me, though, was that I didn't see many wounded people in the street, which led me to believe, at least where I was by the Trade Center, they had never even gotten out of the building. I thought I was going to die. It is as close as I've ever come as a reporter to thinking I was going to die.
Carol Maureen of 60 Minutes 2, CBS News correspondent. The shock of this morning's attack on America wasn't just felt in the cities where the hijacked planes were crashed. It was also felt in the cities where those flights began. CBS's Wyatt Andrews is in Boston tonight.
At Boston's Logan Airport, where two of the hijacked planes originated, scores of relatives of the victims were met by airline officials for consolation and were then taken to a nearby hotel to await information. American Airlines lost its Los Angeles-bound Flight 11, and the airline confirmed the identity of its lost pilot, Captain John Oganowski, who was 52 and a 22-year veteran of the airline. Outside his home in Dracut, Massachusetts, the captain's extended family gathered, including his wife and 3 daughters. Oganowski's brother Jim described him as a hero, a man who joined the Air Force out of patriotism during the Vietnam War and who viewed his work as an airline pilot his life's dream.
Our family is obviously grieving, as is the whole nation, for what has happened today. I personally think I'm in shock. I'm in some type of denial.
Official information about how the flights were seized and how Logan's security might have been breached is still under investigation and is closely held. Airport officials stress that security inside Logan's terminals, as elsewhere across America, is the responsibility of the separate airlines, and that the airport itself was secure.
We've closed the airport to all arriving and all departing flights. We've increased our security measures. We've shut down all the construction sites within Logan Airport, both airside and landside.
At the Oganowski home, official information is also apparently scarce. The pilot's brother Jim told reporters that the family had no information about what Captain Oganowski went through or whether there were any communications between the pilot and FAA controllers. Wyatt Andrews, CBS News, Dracut, Massachusetts.
Wyatt Andrews reporting from Boston. Dateline Philadelphia, Victor Saraceni of a Philadelphia suburb of Makefield Township is believed now to have been the pilot of the second plane to crash into the World Trade Center buildings. Also, Dateline Washington, it's now being said by the top Republican on the Senate Judiciary Committee, Senator Orrin Hatch, that there were some intercepts of some information that he says, quote, included people associated with bin Laden who acknowledged a couple of targets were hit. Hatch said this just a short while ago in an interview with Associated Press. He declined to be more specific. As the president's speech approaches, let's go back to Washington and CBS News Chief Washington correspondent Bob Schieffer. Bob? Well, let's go to John Roberts quickly instead. Quick check off the line of scrimmage here. John Roberts, now back at the White House, allowed on the White House grounds. We're just a few minutes from the president making this, which by acclamation would be by far the most important speech of his presidency.
I would certainly say so, Dan, and this is also an enormous test for this new president. White House officials came out today and said that they would identify and bring to justice those responsible for these heinous acts, Dan. But with the scope and the enormity of this tragedy, I would imagine that just bringing them to justice is certainly not going to be enough for a lot of people. There will be a lot of people who are demanding swift, decisive, and punitive action against those responsible. We're told that in the president's address tonight, he will not even approach the issue of retaliation. He will offer words of resolve and reassurance, and he will express his condolences for the families of the victims of today's massive tragedies. And as you have said on and on throughout this day, Dan, we can't even begin to imagine how many people have died. Sources close to protecting the president say this was, in fact, just like Pearl Harbor, in that they had no indication that anything like this was afoot. There were no targets, if you will, that had come up on their very sensitive radar screen. And Dan, it would seem that the 2,400 and some odd people who died in Pearl Harbor may be eclipsed by today's tragedy. The president expected to speak from the Oval Office in just a few moments' time.
John Roberts, live from the White House, and we'll be going back to the White House very shortly. There are no exact casualty figures. There are no figures even remotely exact from the World Trade Center bombings, or for that matter, at the Pentagon. In the few seconds we have remaining before the president speaks, let's go now to Bob Schieffer in Washington. Bob?
Well, Dan, the president will address a Congress and I think an audience of Americans. It will be a different group than he might have addressed last week. We had this incredible show of bipartisan support just a few minutes ago up on the Capitol steps, where you saw hundreds of members of Congress come together and say, we support the president. We are going to support the president to do whatever is necessary to find whoever did this and to see that they are punished. It's the sort of thing you almost never see except in times of crisis. And we saw again today what you always see in times of crisis, with the American people and their representatives in Congress. They come together as one. I think the president will get a very good reception for whatever he says tonight.
Bob Schieffer in Washington. Now, President Bush is going to address the nation in about a minute. As we wait for that, search and rescue operations stretch into the night here in New York City, hours after terrorists slammed two hijacked commercial airliners into the World Trade Center on the lower part of Manhattan Island. The Twin Towers, where 40 to 50,000 people work on their average day, crumpled to the ground. The full extent of death and injuries unknown. A fire department union official said, firemen's union official said earlier this evening that there may be as many as 200 New York City firefighters may be among the dead. One reason for that is when the first building was hit, firefighters were rushed to the scene, and then of course very quickly the second building was hit, and then fairly quickly after that both buildings collapsed. A third building in the Trade Center complex collapsed this evening. A third hijacked plane, of course, was slammed into the seat of America's military might, the Pentagon, and estimated at least 100 dead and or injured there. A fourth jetliner possibly being diverted to Washington or Camp David, the president's retreat, went down in southwestern Pennsylvania. All told, at least 250 people were aboard the four crashed planes. The FAA grounded all civilian aircraft until at least noon tomorrow. The Wall Street markets will be closed tomorrow. Now, President Bush was flown secretly today from Florida, first to Louisiana, then to Nebraska, but he's back in the White House now, and we have about 25 seconds till you will see President Bush address the nation from the White House. After the President speaks, our CBS News continuing coverage of events on this horrible historic day will continue.
Good evening. Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts. The victims were in airplanes or in their offices, secretaries, businessmen and women, military and federal workers, moms and dads, friends and neighbors. Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror. The pictures of airplanes flying into buildings, fires burning, huge structures collapsing, have filled us with disbelief, terrible sadness, and a quiet, unyielding anger. These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat. But they have failed. Our country is strong. A great people has been moved to defend a great nation. Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America. These acts shatter steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve. America was targeted for attack because we're the brightest beacon for freedom and opportunity in the world. And no one will keep that light from shining. Today our nation saw evil, the very worst of human nature, and we responded with the best of America, with the daring of our rescue workers, with the caring for strangers and neighbors who came to give blood and help in any way they could. Immediately following the first attack, I implemented our government's emergency response plans. Our military is powerful, and it's prepared. Our emergency teams are working in New York City and Washington, D.C. to help with local rescue efforts. Our first priority is to get help to those who have been injured and to take every precaution to protect our citizens at home and around the world from further attacks. The functions of our government continue without interruption. Federal agencies in Washington, which had to be evacuated today, are reopening for essential personnel tonight and will be open for business tomorrow. Our financial institutions remain strong, and the American economy will be open for business as well. The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible and to bring them to justice. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them. I appreciate so very much the members of Congress who have joined me in strongly condemning these attacks. And on behalf of the American people, I thank the many world leaders who have called to offer their condolences and assistance. America and our friends and allies join with all those who want peace and security in the world, and we stand together to win the war against terrorism. Tonight I ask for your prayers for all those who grieve, for the children whose worlds have been shattered, for all whose sense of safety and security has been threatened. And I pray they will be comforted by a power greater than any of us, spoken through the ages in Psalm 23. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. This is a day when all Americans from every walk of life unite in our resolve for justice and peace. America has stood down enemies before, and we will do so this time. None of us will ever forget this day, yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that is good and just in our world. Thank you. Good night, and God bless America.
President Bush speaking live from the Oval Office in the White House. Perhaps ominously, among the things the president said was, and this is not a direct quote, but it's on the money, "We will not differentiate between those who committed these acts today and those who harbored them." The president vowed that no act of terror will darken America's beacon of freedom. We go now to CBS News Chief White House Correspondent John Roberts. John?
Dan, important words for the president to say that we will not differentiate between the terrorists who committed this act and those who harbor them. If this was, in fact, Osama bin Laden's group who was behind this, that message is aimed directly at the Taliban government. Though we should point out, Dan, that every indication we get from the White House tonight is that the explosions that we saw in Kabul tonight were not part of any American action. The White House has absolutely disavowed any connection to those, as has the Defense Department. The president also sending out some important words of reassurance tonight to Americans, saying that the government is still in operation, essential personnel will be back at work later on tonight, and that the government will be open for business tomorrow. And even though the stock market will be closed tomorrow, Dan, the president reassuring Americans, saying that the American economy will be open for business. The big message here tonight that the president was trying to send out was the idea that they can hit us, but they can't knock us down. He said that we have stared enemies in the face before, we have stared them down, and we will do this again. So the president, Dan, tonight, using every ounce of resolve that he can muster to say the United States will recover from this enormous tragedy. Dan?
John Roberts at the White House. Now, U.S. officials are starting to piece together the case of what happened today, and in some instances they're piecing together what they see as links to Osama bin Laden for being responsible for the worst terrorist attack in U.S. history. That Orrin Hatch, the top Republican on the Senate Judiciary Committee tonight, said they, meaning intelligence operations, they have an intercept of some information that included people associated with bin Laden who acknowledged a couple of targets were hit. That's a direct quote from Senator Hatch. He went on to say that law enforcement has data possibly linking one person on one of the 4 ill-fated flights to bin Laden's organization. Now, government and industry officials say at least one flight attendant and 2 passengers called from 3 of the planes as they were being forced down in New York and Washington, each describing similar circumstances. The callers indicated the hijackers were, at least in the beginning, armed with knives. This day's horrific events began with the familiar turbine whine of jet engines over New York. But this Boeing 767 was too low and not in the regular flight pattern. It was aimed straight for the massive twin towers of the World Trade Center. It hit it. CBS's Byron Pitts is on the scene tonight. Byron?
Well, Dan, a few moments ago, a producer for 60 Minutes just walked back from the crime scene and said she counted only 4 floors left, 4 stories left of one of the 110-story towers. At this hour, rescue teams are still waiting, still hoping, still praying they will find survivors alive. Without exaggeration, Ground Zero looks like a battlefield. 8:48 a.m., mayhem in Manhattan.
We saw a plane coming very low, and everyone said, wow, that plane is very, very low. Come on, guys, keep moving. I was walking to work, and all of a sudden, I see a jet crash into the first tower.
An American Airlines flight loaded with 92 people crashes head-on into the North Tower of the World Trade Center.
And then we heard the crash. We ran to the window.
Into the building. It went into the Trade Center.
We hit the Trade Center. We saw the shrapnel fall, and then we said, "Get out!"
And minutes later,
there's another one. Another plane just hit. Right? Oh my God! Another plane has just hit.
I heard a roar, and I looked around thinking that it had to be a helicopter, and I looked up and I saw the second plane hit.
A second commercial plane, a United Airlines jet, also hijacked, carrying 65 people, plows into the South Tower.
First one we thought was an accident. When we heard there was a second one, we definitely thought it was terrorism.
On the ground, witnesses could not believe their eyes. 70 stories up with the building burning, reason gave way to desperation. New York's bravest never had a chance.
We really never even got to that close to the building. An explosion blew and it knocked everybody over.
Less than an hour later, the South Tower came crumbling down.
It collapsed. The top floors collapsed down. I saw it blow and then ran like hell. Thank God I'm 69, but I can still run.
But it was far from over.
Tower 2 collapsed into Tower 1. Within minutes after that, we were ordered out.
When the dust settled, signs of life started to emerge.
Chaos. It's just chaos out here, it really is. So the Twin Towers fall. It's amazing. It's crazy. I can't believe this shit is happening. I really can't. It's nightmares. Armageddon right here.
This was the worst act of terrorism on U.S. soil, but not the first attack on the World Trade Center. 8 years ago, terrorists set off bombs in the basement in an effort to take down the two towers. They failed. Today, mission accomplished.
I tell you what, it's a sad day for America, it really is.
By 2 o'clock this afternoon, firefighters and police officers and paramedics by the hundreds stood by, many of them feeling helpless. There was nothing they could do at this point because the building was still unsecured.
Our main priority is to get in, do a search and rescue, look for survivors, and then clean up what's left. And we can't do that until the building is deemed safe.
Ankle deep in debris and despair, rescue workers waited. Some had relatives of their own inside. One police officer told me her sister worked here on the 40th floor, due in at 9 a.m. She was always early, she said. Always. A sign on a paramedic's van spoke volumes.
We know we have some of the major brass of our department missing. We're trying to find them too.
New York Port Authority Police Chief William Hall choked back tears. For him, this was no longer just work. On a personal level, because I know that these are all your men and it's a business, but I'm sure that a lot of these guys are your friends. How you helping out?
It's business now, it's personal now.
Sir?
It's personal now. We have to get them.
Back live, we have had little relief here. Take a look at this. Hours ago, World Trade Center building number 7 collapsed. A 42-story building that crumbled hours after the initial devastation. It was the one calamity here that was not a surprise. Police had evacuated the area earlier, fearful building number 7 would indeed fall down. Minutes after the second tower collapsed, we met a firefighter named Tim McGee, a New York City firefighter. He was covered in soot from the top of his helmet to the bottom of his feet. He was crying. He told me that he had lost all of his men when the building collapsed. He asked us to reach his wife, Maria, tell her that he was okay, that he had survived. Quote, tell her, I love her. Dan.
Byron Pitts in Lower Manhattan. Mind you that the World Trade Center complex has 7 buildings. So the Twin Towers went down, they're the big ones, but then the 47-story World Trade Center building number 7 collapsed. That was near the end of Byron Pitts' report. Now, building 5 in the World Trade Center complex was for many hours today described as on the brink of collapse. The state of that building at this hour is uncertain. It was long ago evacuated completely. Now about today's other terror strike at the seat and symbol of U.S. military might, the U.S. Defense Department, the Pentagon, first opened in 1943, never before directly attacked. There were 64 people aboard American Flight 77, the jetliner hijackers used to ram into the Pentagon. CBS's David Martin reports the deadly impact there. David?
Dan, fires are still burning, but Pentagon officials say the flames are under control and the Pentagon will be open for business tomorrow. But Defense Secretary Rumsfeld had a grim warning that casualties will be high.
Some people have been lifted out and taken away in ambulances, and the numbers will be calculated, and it will not be a few.
The first attack ever on the Pentagon occurred at 9:38 a.m. Eastern Time.
Clipped this pole over here, hit another pole and slammed right into the building. Huge explosion, and then utter pandemonium, as you might imagine. I mean, everybody was screaming, oh my God.
A hijacked American Airlines jet, which had just taken off from Dulles Airport, flew right up the main highway leading north into Washington and straight into the citadel of American military power.
There was no doubt about it. It was American Airlines slammed right into the building, and there was no doubt about it. Whoever was piloting that plane was aiming for the Pentagon.
Fearful that, like the World Trade Center, a second airliner was on its way, most of the building's 23,000 workers fled.
Plane's coming in. Come on. Let's go. Come on. We're not playing around here. Let's go.
F-16 fighters circled overhead looking for a second attack, but the damage had already been done. The plane had drilled a hole about a third of the way through the world's largest office building. The wounded were rushed to nearby hospitals as the fire spread and an entire section of the building collapsed, trapping many, many more inside.
Arlington search and rescue personnel are just now, and it's about almost 2 o'clock, just now gaining access to portions of the building where the plane hit because the fires were too intense.
One ray of hope. The Pentagon is undergoing a major renovation and some of the offices in the path of the plane were vacant.
We're trying to find out who made it out okay and account for the people that may not have made it out.
When the plane hit, Defense Secretary Rumsfeld moved from his office on the other side of the building into the National Military Command Center in the basement. With smoke hanging in the air, he ordered aircraft carriers, amphibious ships, cruisers, and destroyers to New York and Washington, where they can serve as floating hospitals, help with the cleanup, and provide air defense against the possibility of more attacks. And the chairman of the Joint Chiefs made a clear threat of military retaliation.
I have no intentions of discussing today what comes next, but make no mistake about it, your armed forces are ready.
Right now, suspicion focuses on Osama bin Laden, and we have some new pictures of this damage done to the Pentagon by whoever these terrorists were. First, really close-up pictures of the damage. I'm looking at it for the first time with you. I do not see any evidence there of the fuselage of the plane. Those are corridors I've walked down thousands of times, and right now they're unrecognizable. Back to you, Dan.
David Martin reporting live again from the Pentagon. New York City Mayor Rudolph Giuliani has confirmed that some of the first police officers and firefighters on the scene were killed. And the mayor added that in general, quote, the number of casualties will be more than most of us can bear. Mike Carter, vice president of the Firefighters Union here in New York City, estimates that half of the 400 firefighters who first reached the scene may, I underline that word, may be dead. I quote Mike Carter of the Firefighters Union, "We have entire companies that are just missing. We lost chiefs. We're going to have to bury a lot of people," Carter said. Roman Catholic Church Cardinal Edward Egan, who administered last rites to dozens of victims, said that the firefighters and police were, quote, dead in great numbers, quote unquote, the Cardinal. Police Department and union sources, speaking on condition of anonymity, said that 78 police officers were missing. However, Assistant Chief Tom Fahey said the number of known missing among police officers is not that high. The emergency medical service worker, Luis Garcia, said initial reports indicated that bodies were buried beneath the 2 feet at least of soot on streets around the Trade Center. And Garcia said a lot of vehicles are running over bodies because bodies are all over the place. Garcia is a 15-year veteran who had 2 people die in his ambulance on the way to the hospital. That gives you some of the mood, the atmosphere, and some of the facts and eyewitness reports that surround us here in New York City tonight. Now, to punish those behind today's attacks, the U.S. must first and foremost determine who there are. There's been much speculation about that today, but so far it's all speculation. The facts are few. Osama bin Laden, the renegade Saudi Arabian millionaire who was last reported in Afghanistan, he's widely believed to be in Afghanistan, is the most frequently mentioned suspect. But as we have before, for fairness and accuracy, it's dictated that we say nobody knows who committed these crimes today. But CBS's Jim Stewart in Washington is closely following the investigation and checking his many good sources. Jim, what can you tell us?
Dan, federal lawmen are apparently fanning out tonight to follow up on the first leads in this case. Some search warrants have been served, but officials caution it is too early to tell whether they will bear fruit. Other agents are poring over the flight manifest of the 4 doomed planes. Meanwhile, intelligence officials say they have developed what one calls significant indicators pointing to Osama bin Laden as the man behind this attack. The information suggests that the planes were hijacked by members of Al-Qaeda, the terrorist group that reports to bin Laden. Sources describe the intelligence as communications intercepts. It's not definitive, said one official, but it is persuasive. Sensing that bin Laden would quickly become a suspect, Afghanistan's ruling Taliban party, which has been giving him safe refuge, called a press conference. We do not allow Osama bin Laden to operate from our land, the Taliban said, warning the U.S. not to take any, quote, speedy actions to retaliate. Meanwhile, law enforcement sources said there had been no credible claims for the joint attacks and that intelligence had picked up no specific threats aimed at targets inside the United States before the attacks took place. Within minutes of today's attacks, officials were pointing to the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center by a group with ties to bin Laden, citing it as proof that bin Laden has never given up on his dream to destroy the symbol of America's economic power. And in recent months, analysts say bin Laden has only become more and more sophisticated in his attempts to strike at the United States. They point specifically to his simultaneous attack on 2 U.S. embassies in East Africa.
They also went directly against a U.S. destroyer, which was heavily guarded, and they did put a hole in that ship, the USS Cole. So they have a track record of conducting attacks that one would think they might not be capable of.
Late today, the U.S. intelligence community was rapidly sorting through a priority list of potential suspects within the U.S. for electronic eavesdropping, with sources saying the number may reach into the hundreds. There is also specific physical evidence that investigators are eager to examine. First are the transcripts of communications between the suicide aircraft and ground controllers, including telephone calls from passengers to the ground, and second are cockpit tape recordings of conversations in the doomed aircraft. The working theory is that the hijackers were pilots themselves and forcefully took over the controls to dive the jets straight into their targets. Dan?
Jim Stewart reporting live from Washington. One of the few things that seems certain tonight is that the hijackings and attacks were meticulously planned and carried out with great precision. There's also a school of thought that says this kind of operation required a lot of financial resources. And there is a school of thought among intelligence operatives at high levels in this country and abroad that Osama bin Laden, despite the fact that he is a multimillionaire, that even bin Laden requires additional financial support from somewhere to carry out this kind of operation. Now, some of the speculation is supported by very few facts, if any. However, this thing being carried out with great precision is consistent with the hard facts. Somebody planned this thing exceptionally well. Correspondent Bob Orr, who covers aviation for CBS News, has pieced a lot of this together. Bob?
Well, Dan, it clearly was a highly coordinated attack this morning, launched with simultaneous breaches of security at 3 of the nation's busiest airports. Under the cover of the hectic morning rush, when airports are particularly vulnerable, hijackers managed to board 4 large passenger jets, 2 each from American Airlines and United Airlines, 2 of the strongest symbols of U.S. aviation.
American Flight 11, a Boeing 767, took off first at 7:45 this morning from Boston, bound for Los Angeles. 13 minutes later, another 767, United Flight 175, also left Boston for L.A. At virtually the same moment, United Flight 93, a 757, took off from Newark for San Francisco. And to the south at Washington's Dulles Airport, another 757, American Flight 77, flew off towards Los Angeles. The first sign that anything was wrong was noticed by air traffic controllers, who watched the jets stray from their planned routes. This computerized radar path shows how the first plane, American Airlines Flight 11, climbed out of Boston and, as expected, headed northwest across Massachusetts. But watch what happened. As the plane entered eastern New York, it turned sharply to the south and headed straight for Manhattan. The 767 hit the World Trade Center at 8:48 this morning. And 16 minutes later, United Flight 175 delivered the second blow. The jets, fueled for cross-country flights, were filled with tens of thousands of gallons of volatile fuel. They were literally flying bombs, each with an explosive power far greater than the blast that leveled the Oklahoma City Federal Building. Based on radio communications from the planes, FAA authorities knew they were dealing with a terrorist attack and immediately moved to close New York and Washington airports. And for the first time in U.S. history, all flights across the country were grounded.
The airport's being evacuated. They need to go home.
But there were still 2 hijacked jets in the air, and one of them, American Airlines Flight 77, took aim on the Pentagon. It crashed in a fireball at 9:38. Meanwhile, the 4th plane, the flight from Newark to San Francisco, was heading west, and it traveled all the way into northeastern Ohio. The controllers monitoring radar watched as the jet then did a U-turn and headed back towards the East Coast. At 10:20, 2.5 hours after the four-pronged attack was launched, the plane crashed in a rural Pennsylvania field.
I happened to hear the plane come through. It sounded like it was running normally. When it come down over top of me, I seen it go nosedive straight into the ground down here. Everything was running fine on the plane, it sounded like.
Authorities say 285 people died aboard the airliners today, and tonight the FAA is at a loss to explain how the security failures happened. There is some new information that in at least 2 of the attacks, the hijackers may have used knives, and those are harder than guns for security officials to detect. But most importantly, remember this: these were suicide attacks, long known to be the very hardest to stop. There's no piece of equipment and no screener that absolutely can stop a terrorist who is willing to die. Dan?
Live in Washington, Bob Orr. There they were, the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center, soaring symbols of American power and wealth. And in just minutes, there they weren't, reduced to rubble by faceless enemies. The world's most famous skyline changed forever by a horrendous, cowardly act of terror. CBS's Richard Schlesinger has more about the impact of an image that will last forever.
Right now, another one. It is difficult to overestimate the power of these images. Oh my God. Difficult to put into words what today's attacks have done to the nation. Calamities almost unparalleled in the country's history.
Pearl Harbor is one of the first things that comes to mind.
Evan Cornog is a historian and journalist at Columbia University. As the attack unfolded live before our eyes, it was hard not to be reminded of the most recent large-scale sneak attack, almost 60 years ago.
A date which will live in infamy.
After Pearl Harbor, there was the Japanese fleet to go after. One knew where to find the enemy. Here, it's a much more complicated issue.
Just as the U.S. Navy was a symbol of our power then, the Pentagon and the World Trade Center were symbols of our power now, our place in the world.
Those towers are saying, look at us, we're important. And somebody has come along and said, you're not as important as you think.
We are certainly not as invulnerable as we may have thought. For years, authorities have practiced for terrorist attacks, many times under the direction of Jerome Hauer, a former emergency management official in New York.
You have to plan for the worst. That's just, particularly in a city like in New York, in Washington, D.C., the real thing is never like a drill. The enormity of the situation today is just just incredible.
The symbolism of the attack was impossible to ignore overseas.
The feeling is that throughout the world, the Americans are not as powerful as they were thought to be. Therefore, these terrorists were really going to achieve a symbolic victory.
But officials here in New York and in Washington know the difference between a symbolic victory and a real victory. When the World Trade Center was brought to the ground, the country was brought to its knees. But terrorism experts say just for a while.
Did the bad guys win today? They got that image. They got
well. They certainly
just
struck a blow today. There's no question about it. We are a very resilient nation, and we are very resilient people.
And we're a very different people than we were just before 9 o'clock this morning when this all began. Richard Schlesinger, CBS News, New York.
During this hour, President Bush said that the terror attacks today took, quote, thousands of lives. The search goes on tonight in the rubble of the World Trade Center towers struck this morning by 2 hijacked commercial jetliners, the worst terror attack ever on U.S. soil. President Bush vowed to find and punish those responsible. CBS News coverage of the attack on America will continue in a moment.
There. A similar attack moments later in Washington, D.C. A jet which was coming out of Dulles Airport, hijacked. Barbara Olson, who has appeared on this air many times, the wife of Ted Olson, picks up the phone and calls her husband, makes not 1 but 2 phone calls, explaining that there are men on board with knives, or a knife-like weapon at least. We're not sure that they were knives, but they had hijacked her plane. She was feverishly trying to get in touch with her husband, and shortly thereafter, as this plane took off to the west, then its warning beacons went off, and it could no longer be identified as this American Airlines flight. Air traffic controllers in Washington, D.C. saw this blip on their radar, saw it streaming directly for 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. They notified security officials within the United States government. Almost immediately after that, according to reports in the late edition of the Washington Post, this plane made a circle, whipped around Washington, and at a low altitude and very high speed, slammed into the side of the Pentagon. Tonight, the first pictures from up close in a pool feed provided by the Pentagon, the bodies that lay out front. Now, Somerset County, Pennsylvania, the fourth of 4 jets hijacked this day. This one described by our own Britt Hume as streaming up the Hudson River. By some stroke of miracle, somehow, instead of crashing into Camp David, as may have been the target, or the White House, which officials are suggesting as a possible second target, this plane went down in Somerset County. All of those on board killed.
Anything else that you saw? Were you there for the second hit by the plane?
About 10 minutes later, the second building went off.
Did you see it?
Yes, I saw it. It just blew up. A big explosion. People started running. It was just chaos everywhere.
A few minutes later, the president's chief of staff, Andrew Card, told Mr. Bush about the New York City events during an appearance at an elementary school in Sarasota, Florida. President Bush then gave this statement.
Today, we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act. Terrorism against our nation will not stand.
Program will now run into some trouble as we fight what's the real identifiable enemy here, which is terrorism. That we're going to have to look at the fact that there are probably about 5,000 people in this country in different kinds of cells who are attached to various organizations that are potentially a threat to all of us.
Carl Bernstein, author and journalist. Carl, thanks for doing this. Appreciate having you on and talking about it. We want to update you again with what we know in Boston. There is a pretty large-scale search involving, looks like tactical units there at one of the posh hotels in Boston, the Westin Copley Hotel. Let's listen in. WHDH is our affiliate, see if we can get a little more perspective on what's going on.
Fine. It wasn't very long, was it?
Their guns drawn up to the 16th floor where Christina McKenna saw them. They brought in the fiber optic equipment. They want to look under the doors. They want to see exactly what they're getting into before going into these rooms. We did get word a few minutes ago that possibly some suspects were in custody. That is not confirmed, but that they had gone back in to look and see if anyone else was in the rooms. I can't tell you how many people are out here. People are standing on top of cars just trying to get a better look. But as Christina said, it seems to be business as usual. I'm not sure what short floor she's on at this point, but I can see into the lobby, still people milling about, employees still inside, trying to do their best to keep people calm, let everyone know that everything is okay for the time being. No evacuation at this point. But again, 2 ambulances waiting here outside the armored truck that the tactical team came from. They have been going back and forth to get more equipment. The last time they came out, they did get that fiber optic equipment, and they haven't come back since. But there is a huge police presence as they wait to see exactly if there were more suspects inside.
Again, following a situation in Boston, Massachusetts, the Copley Hotel, police searching rooms. We're hearing talk of suspects, still trying to piece together the relevance of this to the attacks, 2 of which were staged out of Boston Logan Airport. More now as we continue on the 1 o'clock hour on MSNBC. 1 o'clock on the East Coast. Welcome to NBC News continuing coverage on MSNBC. You are looking at a live picture from outside the Copley Westin Hotel in Boston. Ambulances, apparently a police armored vehicle and tactical units searching rooms there. It has not been entirely characterized who they're looking for, what intelligence they're operating on, but we believe this is in some way connected to the attack on America. Two of the attacks, the World Trade Center attack staged by hijackers who were on flights out of Boston Airport. Now, before we join WHDH coverage, our Justice correspondent Pete Williams has passed on the information that federal law enforcement officials say some arrests are being made this morning in connection with the attacks. People who are apparently suspected of having connections or thought to have been associated with suspected terrorists. You know, we're gonna try and figure out more on where these people play, and it's not clear if what we're seeing here is related, if they are in fact making arrests. But let's listen. WHDH TV Boston with their live coverage.
Employees, and one of the questions here is that apparently there was there were a number of airport identification badges missing, perhaps as many as 800 over the last year. Investigators want to know what happened to these, who used them, and if that played any role into the tragic occurrence that we saw yesterday.
We'll continue to use federal air marshals traveling
through a number of leads, a number of individuals whom we believe may have had something to do with the hijackings, and we are pursuing those leads aggressively. Let me conclude at this juncture by emphasizing again the FBI's total and unwavering commitment to this investigation. We will not stop, and as I said before, we will leave no stone unturned until we have determined who was responsible for these attacks on our freedom. Now, I would be happy to entertain questions, as I'm sure the Attorney General would.
We come to you on a crisp night at the landmark entrance to the Indiana University campus, the Sample Gates. Good evening, I'm WTIU News Director Chuck Carney. We are here in the Midwest, hundreds of miles away from the three sites of terrorist actions this week, where it is certain thousands have died. But our hearts and minds are all very close to what has happened. Tonight, we talk to those from southern Indiana who barely escaped with their lives from these acts. We look at how our area is dealing with the loss and trying to help.
Whether to cancel classes or not.
During the early moments after Tuesday morning's attacks, Indiana University tried to first determine if it would continue business for the day. University administrators decided the best way for faculty, staff, and students to handle the events would be to continue with classes.
Safety is our major concern, and also the ability to have students have an opportunity to talk with others and faculty members. We're planning forums on each of our campuses for students to meet with faculty members, to be able to discuss these issues, be able to understand better the difficulties that we're all faced.
By Wednesday afternoon, those forums had begun. Professors gathered to speak with students about the crisis and discuss the aftermath. One warned against Americans becoming extreme nationalists.
Our nation is in crisis. In the days and weeks to come, our country will confront hard questions. As we do so, we must beware of jingoism, and we must not allow our appropriate anger at terrorism or desire to see the terrorists punished to pervert our sense of justice.
After the forum, IU leaders gathered to mark the placement of wreaths at the Sample Gates at the western entrance to the campus. In the dark time, IU officials nonetheless chose to place bright bouquets on the display.
The bright, colorful flowers and the wreaths represent their lives and how rich they were and how tragically short they were abbreviated.
There have also been numerous church and prayer services over the past couple of days. We will take you to some of those events later in the show. 28 employees of the Crane Naval Surface Warfare Center happen to be spending their final week of a 5-week executive education course in Washington, D.C. this week. Over this week, the class was to spend time in the White House, the Capitol, and the Pentagon. Star of Indiana and Bill Cook sent a bus to pick up the class yesterday. It arrived at the Indianapolis airport just after 10 last night. A weary group of Crane professionals stepped off to tell the story of how they were literally yards away from certain death. It just happened that the one day in the Pentagon was Tuesday. A session with the Undersecretary of the Navy began at 9 a.m. and wrapped up just before 9:45.
The Secretary had told us about the World Trade Center. So when we heard the impact, everybody jumped up and sort of looked at one another. But I think without even saying, everybody knew, but we thought it was a bomb.
In fact, an American Airlines jet had crashed into the very part of the Pentagon where the group was located. The Spia class was in what's called the E ring, located on the outside part of the Pentagon structure up on the 5th floor. Only a day after the attack did the class realize they actually were on top of the crashed jet. Inside the room, no one could see through the smoke.
I opened the door, the black smoke just gushed out. I looked down and the stairs was gone.
To the right we couldn't go, and to the left people were saying go back, we can't go this way, and so we just went that way because we knew we couldn't go to the right. And we got that dark place, and all of a sudden we heard somebody calling in a distance. It was just a nice thing to hear.
There was someone at the end of the hallway saying, "Follow my voice, hold on to each other, follow my voice, we're going to get you out of here." So we hung on to each other, and we went through the darkness following that voice, and finally came to the light.
Without that class acting as calm as they did and as professional as they were, there clearly was the opportunity for lost lives.
The last person you saw there now joins us live. Jim Buer led the SPIA executive class on this Washington, D.C. trip, and he was in the portion of the Pentagon struck by that aircraft. And Jim, the last part of the story we were referring to the voice in the darkness, and I cannot imagine what that must have been like. It must have seemed as if an angel was guiding you out of that building.
It sure did. Just before the darkness really hit, you could see a little bit, but smoke had come down to about waist high, and you were just trying to get through. We stepped over an area where the floor had already fallen about 3 feet, and then all of a sudden we were engulfed in darkness, and you couldn't see, you couldn't breathe, and for probably 30 seconds or so, it was as if a calmness settled over you. You thought, I'll never get out of here. And that lasted for probably 30 seconds to 45 seconds. And then all of a sudden, you heard this voice saying, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, there's a light here, follow my voice, and all that sort of lifted, and you knew at that point that you could get out. And it took about another 40 or 50 feet of that darkness, but we did.
You have said, you said last night, and you've said it also today when we've been talking, that it was really unclear at the time that you were right by where the impact of this was. And of course, as we saw in the piece, most of you thought it was a bomb. You were pretty sure it was a terrorist attack, but you thought it might be a bomb. So how surprised were you yesterday when it really kind of dawned on you how close you were?
It was very sombering. The class had all gathered for breakfast, and when I got down to breakfast, they were looking at the paper, and there was hardly a word being said when they realized, for the first time in looking at the diagram in the Washington Post, that the plane actually had come into the Pentagon and crashed in directly underneath our classroom. That we thought it was 200 or 300 feet away, when in fact it was directly under the classroom, took out the first 2 floors, and that's the reason why it filled up with smoke so fast. That's why it was such amazing heat.
And it was happenstance you're even in that part of the building.
Yes, usually we use a classroom over on the other side of the building with the Department of the Navy. But since that remodeled space was for the Navy, some of the people had moved in, and one of our speakers who arranges the classroom for us suggested a couple of weeks ago that we should try out this new state-of-the-art classroom. It's called the Battleship Classroom, and that we should really try it out. And so we did, and otherwise we'd have been in the other part of the building. But as it was, we were directly over it.
I'm struck because of anybody who has a right to be angry at this point. You are standing here after having been directly on the front lines of this, but you don't seem angry. How are you changed, though?
Well, I don't think my life will ever be the same. I mean, it really puts things in perspective. You really think about what's important. The first thing was to call family, talk to family, and you recognize that there was a much higher power that was at work in protecting us from the terrorist attack. But it truly was a life-changing event.
Jim, good to see you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us. Well, earlier this evening, we spoke with Indiana University President Miles Brand. The president is in the midst of a trustees meeting tonight and is, in fact, now at a dinner event at the Indiana Memorial Union. Among the major decisions he has made included last night's call to postpone this weekend's IU home football game with Kentucky after the university had earlier agreed to play the game.
The Big Ten had left flexibility for individual schools to make a decision. It was a difficult decision. We thought through it, and we reached a conclusion and got out the word as soon as we could. We need to be respectful of this moment in the history of the country, and we felt that that was the best way to be respectful.
You've now attended several events here on this campus. There's been a lot of talk among the students, among the faculty and staff about what has happened. How do you feel the campus is handling it as a whole?
The campus, like the country, is in mourning. We've lost the lives of some wonderful people. There's a lot of sense of loss and lack of understanding, lack of the ability to attribute meaning to these events. I'm very proud of the campus, given that set of issues. It has risen together as a community, in a solid, unified way to begin to try and make sense of it. We've held campus forums. Students have had the opportunity to discuss it. But everything's not perfect. One issue that really disturbs me deeply, is the scapegoating of certain individuals because of ethnicity or skin color.
Is that happening?
We have seen some Muslim students who've been verbally harassed. And that's just not acceptable. It is not acceptable. We're all one community, and scapegoating anybody in an instance of this kind is just unacceptable. And we are taking all the steps in terms of providing security that we can. The most important aspect of it is that people at the university, people in the university family, look out for each other, support each other.
In times of war, university campuses tend to be among the most active places for protest, for whatever. The nation is now talking about war openly. It's not been declared, but it's being talked about. Are there steps being made to prepare for what's to come, because it could be a long process?
Universities are marketplaces of ideas. They're open places for discussion of all points of view. And we welcome that. There has to be a place in society, and universities are it, in which both sides are heard. We will engage as a university in seeking peace and justice. We will engage in a university to make sure that all people are treated fairly. And so we would expect, in times of anxiety and war, that university communities would be places in which these discussions go on in earnest.
Okay. Thank you, President Brand.
You bet.
Thank you. The Red Cross chapter in Bloomington is no different than other Red Cross chapters across the nation. Since the attacks, area residents have lined up to give blood and provide other forms of help to the victims of these disasters. Our Holly Gregory went to the local chapter to get a sense of how the area is responding and how the Red Cross is handling it.
I'm here with Ed Vendesen, the Director of Emergency Services for the Monroe County chapter of the American Red Cross. What is the American Red Cross doing on a local level?
On a local level, we're getting involved in a couple of areas. Of course, blood donation. The amount of blood that has been dedicated to the affected East Coast areas is at about 80,000 pints, and we're asking that people call in, make appointments rather than just show up. But our blood need is going to be critical for about 6 to 8 weeks. We also have begun fundraising to support the efforts in New York City, in Washington, D.C., Somerset, Pennsylvania. People can donate locally by stopping by calling calling 332-7292 or our national number, which is 1-800-HELP-NOW. Also, we've been activated for what's called family well-being inquiry. And if you have a direct family member that's in the affected areas and you cannot reach them, contact the Red Cross. We'll be able to help. We've had a couple of successful reunions already.
And do you have any advice on how families can be getting involved in this? I know that's sometimes therapeutic for a family
really
to come
is,
together.
and it's something I've been real concerned about, and I saw at the community service that was held at First United Methodist last evening. Disasters, and particularly terrorist activities like this, have devastating effects on children, and it's important that children be included in family activities, that children be encouraged to speak about their feelings, and that they are allowed to ask questions. And if parents are uncomfortable or have any questions, the Red Cross has a very good brochure to help. It's called Helping Children Cope with Disaster, and locally the Center for Behavioral Health is also geared up to provide support. But we must include the children. The stress for them is quite incredible.
Now, will any members of this chapter of the American Red Cross be going to New York for help?
Funny you should ask. Yes, in fact, we just got activated about 5 minutes ago.
Wow.
Two of our disaster mental health people will be going to Somerset, Pennsylvania, which was the location of the one aircraft that did not reach its target. 3 other individuals, including myself, have been activated and will probably be leaving tomorrow for the New York City area.
And what will you be doing when you get there?
Primarily it's in mass care. It'll be providing support to the rescue workers, to police, to fire, and also providing some family service counseling as may be appropriate.
How do you feel about that, anticipating that trip?
I've got a lot of adrenaline going right now. New York is my home area, and this hits very closely. My father-in-law is a retired captain on the New York City Fire Department, so some of these individuals who are involved, I'm sure we know. And I'm always really very willing and ready to help. I'm trained to handle routine disasters, hurricanes, tornadoes, floods. This is going to be different, and we're prepared.
Well, thank you so much for all of your hard work.
Thank you for your support.
This is Holly Gregory for WTIU News.
To help with the blood donation, as you heard Ed mention, the Red Cross does request you call and make an appointment to donate blood. The number to call locally is 331-1300. After hours, the number is 1-800-GIVE-LIFE. Donations of money are also needed. That number is 332-7292. After hours, 1-800-HELP-NOW. If you are still trying to find out about family or friends who may be in one of the areas, again, call 332-7292. Among the people with local ties in the midst of the terrorist attack, a former Indiana University tennis player. My colleague, WFIU News Director Will Murphy, joins me here, and you spoke with this young man who started working in the financial district of New York just this summer.
That's right. He's working as an analyst for Lehman Brothers, and went to work on Tuesday, and his whole week has gone downhill from there.
It's some pretty dramatic comments that you had in your interview earlier. Let's hear some of those comments.
Everyone started running behind me, and I didn't really know what it was. First I thought it was someone with a gun. There was like all this loud noises coming down over the walkway, and I just kept running with everyone else. I got through the back of my building out the exit, and I just looked up at the building, and we saw what happened. No one really knew what it was at that time. Then when we actually heard on the someone was listening to the radio that it was a plane. You know, we thought it was maybe an accident. You know, no one really knew it was a terrorist act at that time. The second explosion happened. I didn't see the plane come in. So we were at towards the side. We just saw the ball of flame come out the side of the second building. I was right about, I would say, 500 yards away. Actually, my apartment was evacuated last night. There was a bomb scare in the Empire State Building, which is about 2 blocks from me. Everyone was standing on the corner with a police officer, and they told us it was a false threat. I've been from New York my whole life, so, I mean, obviously right now it's not a good place to be, but, you know, whoever's behind this, you know, we'll be able to try to track them down. I mean, there's always been threats of terrorism in New York, and it's obviously the worst thing ever. Still, I'm proud to be from New York, and I still want to stay around here if I can.
Will, did you get the sense from talking to him that there's a sense of fear, or is there a sense of determination to get through this thing?
I got the sense that he's the kind of New Yorker that Giuliani's been talking about with there's nothing going to throw him. It's something that New Yorkers sort of live with, this notion of anxiety, and this was just a sort of heightened state of that. And like you heard in the tape, he's just really impressed with the sort of resolve that New Yorkers have shown.
And just another one of them trying to dig in and survive all of this.
That's right.
All right. Thank you very much, Will. By some coincidence, the host of the Fox television program America's Most Wanted was in Bloomington Tuesday morning. John Walsh was taping segments of a program intended to air this Saturday featuring the case of missing IU student Jill Bierman. We spoke to Walsh at noon on Tuesday when events were still unfolding. Since he has profiled alleged terrorists on his program, we asked his opinion on the disasters. Has it just been a matter of time before something like this would happen?
Well, I think everybody's predicted that. You know, I've spent a lot of time doing terrorists and working with Interpol, and Interpol, I was allowed to go into their secret map room and look at the number of bombings, terrorist bombings around the world. Certainly Israel, North Ireland, France, Italy, Africa has suffered literally thousands of terrorist attacks. And we've been very lucky. We've had one huge domestic attack, the Oklahoma bombing, and a couple of other Muslim-related bombings. I think we've been very, very lucky up till now.
Saturday night's America's Most Wanted program has been rewritten to include information on this week's terrorist attacks, but Fox still planned to carry the Bierman piece. On Wednesday, we visited with Bloomington's mayor, John Fernandez. He, of course, expressed his sadness at the attack and also conveyed his hopes that the diverse community of Bloomington would not turn anger upon itself.
You do those things, and then frankly, you just talk to people and try and encourage folks to, as bad as this is, to think about how we need to work together, to think of positive things we can do, like organizing blood drives, like communicating with folks who may have lost friends or loved ones, and thinking of, you know, the positive things that we can focus on.
Safety of citizens, particularly from the international community who may be in Bloomington, has been a concern from the start of this crisis. Former Bloomington and IU police chief, now Indiana University's head of security, Jim Kennedy, joins us. And Jim, we heard the president of Indiana University earlier saying that there have been some incidents, and I know that you expressed concern from the very opening moments of this whole thing about that, and indeed there have been a few of those, have there not?
That's correct. We've had a few incidents where students have been actually touched rudely and some pretty bad language.
Mm-hmm. There are extra patrols around campus right now. Will that continue for a while?
Yeah, for the foreseeable future, that's certainly true.
What are they looking for right now? I mean, I watched one officer literally kind of looking in holes and checking out everything. I mean, you kind of have to do that now, don't you?
Well, we're looking for, if we see suspicious packages, certainly. We're looking for large groups that perhaps have something other than just walking on their mind, things like that. It's pretty difficult to give you an idea exactly what we're looking for, but anything out of the ordinary.
You spoke with some of the students that you feared for their safety early on, advised them on what they should do. What is your advice continuing on with what some of these students who may be targeted should do?
Well, they should be quite aware of their surroundings, and if they see anything or feel anything that's out of the ordinary, they should call the police immediately. 911 gets them here on the campus to us, and or to the city police. And the city police have been working with us quite closely and been quite helpful as well.
You know, I don't want to really publicize a lot of the things that have gone on other campuses in the state and other campuses elsewhere, but certainly you're on the aware that something, threats could be called in. What actions are being taken to try to be ready for something like that and check it out?
Well, we have a little bit of history, fortunately, and things that we have seen here in the past 10, 15 years ago. You remember the embassy takeover, and we had some situations there which are prepared us for some of the things we see here, and we've learned from that experience. We've also been in contact, like you say, with other universities, and there's some things that we've shared and they've shared with us that have helped us out immensely.
Okay. Jim Kennedy, thank you very much. All right. Well, even so far away from the physical scene of these tragedies, the experience of literally seeing this unfold before us on television has been more than overwhelming for some. Our Holly Gregory visited with a local grief counselor to talk about how to handle the feelings we're all experiencing.
I'm here with Dr. Tom Sexton in the Center for Human Growth in the School of Education, and Dr. Sexton's also a family psychologist. And tell me, what's the most common reaction about the terrorist tragedies across America? What have you been hearing? A lot of fear or anger?
We've actually, Holly, been hearing a number of different things, almost dependent upon who it is that's having the reaction. On the one hand, a lot of our students and faculty and associate instructors have friends and relatives in that particular area. I mean, as an international university, we have many, many connections to these major metropolitan areas. So it's surprising the number of people that are very afraid because they don't know what's happened to friends, what's happened to relatives. So that's one of the reactions. It's just sort of a fear about not knowing what's happened. We have had students who have known people on the plane.
Right. Well, what are some of the things that help us process some of these emotions? Is it helpful to watch all of this news coverage? Is it helpful to get involved with a Red Cross or a different organization? Is it helpful just to talk to somebody? What helps us work through this?
For people that are wondering about information and lack information about relatives, of course, the thing there is to try to help people get connected with information sources so that they can feel the support and get answers to very immediate questions. For others, we're finding that what's very useful is a context in which they can talk. It's almost as if many of us need to just be able to talk about our different reactions, our questions, and our ideas. And so in that sense, rather than a specific answer, it's more the ability to have someone to talk with, to share some of your ideas about. And there's a sense of support that comes from that.
And what do we do with a lot of the anger that we're feeling? I mean, so many of us are so frustrated and we're saddened and we're grieving, and it gets funneled into manifesting itself as angry. And what do you do with that?
Well, I imagine for most of us what we do with it is we talk about it, we watch that anger sort of go through the cycle that it goes through.
What are some of the warning signs for either people that are so saddened or so angry by these events that perhaps they're not processing these emotions well on their own and they should seek professional help?
Well, 2 days ago we were running our lives as we always had. Yesterday that got changed pretty dramatically. My suggestion is that if life continues to be dramatically interrupted and the functioning of life continues to be dramatically interrupted, it's time to do something about that. Now, that may be at an individual level. It may be with sleep, it may be with feelings of grief and sadness. If that interrupts functioning, it's something to pay attention to. It may be with performance with a child. Unless they're directly impacted, that's probably unlikely. And in terms of anger, it may be the inability to control that and focus on the tasks at hand. Mm-hmm. But as we all try to find a way to get our lives back moving forward, albeit that they'll never be the same again, the degree to which you can't get there anymore is a very important signal.
And those are the things that you just watch for on your own?
Absolutely. And your friends watch for. And that context and that social group that you organize around you has to watch for.
Okay, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
For your time.
Of course, the toughest thing for many of us to do is try to establish some sense of routine, find something that seems like it's normal again. In Bloomington, as in other places, there are signs that things are making an attempt at normalcy because, for the rest of us, life does go on. On Wednesday morning, the signs that things might be a little off came from little things. City garbage running an hour late. United States flags began appearing in force in most neighborhoods. Even as merchants put out their freshest produce at the regular Wednesday farmers market, slightly smaller crowds in the headlines could not put the tragedy very far away. On the IU campus, the surest sign that things go on, parking was scarce. Tickets were plentiful. And at Bloomington Hospital, life arriving on the day of so much death. Gary Moore III, just over 6 pounds, his mother's labor began just about the time of the first terrorist strike.
Everybody else is at home suffering and crying, and yet we want to, rejoice about what happened, but yet you're kind of confused on what to do.
Yeah, it's pretty bad whenever, I've been walking around with a grin all day, but other people's in other states are just mourning, and I'm gonna be happy I got my little boys.
Even as we try to continue with our lives, we continue to grip with the reality of lives lost. Services of remembrance will continue through the weekend as we ponder what has happened and wonder what's coming. Certainly every American has experienced something unforgettable. As if we could, we remind ourselves to never forget. Good night.
Let us come, gather ourselves, and bring ourselves to God. Indeed, God is in our midst even now.
I have no question in my mind, but this was a defining moment in the history of our country. I do not have the insight how it will turn out, but we will be different. It's innocence lost, it's problems we face together, and our strength will lie in our community.
Yesterday, my feelings were hurt more than they've ever been hurt before. I feel bad for carrying on with my life, going to class. I swear I think about those people all the time and their families. I just don't know how I'm supposed to deal with this.
Until this time, the United States hasn't really suffered the type of blow from terrorism that's far more common in other countries. In fact, there doesn't seem to be any safe haven in the world left. We have endemic problems that we're all going to have to share, and perhaps this will make us more alert in America to the fact that there are peoples all over the world facing problems just like ours. We're not safe, we're not special. We share that commonality with everybody.
Really, the most important part of our security is going to be each other. We need to look out for each other.